Okay, and reset.
I have another idea.
What?
I have a male hygiene professional. Yes.
I know. You must have something strange over there. I know. It's until 500 people tied up with uniforms. We're all trying to pay to get that ugly engine. That was sugar night. Behind you. Hey, over there, left. Hold on, Mr. Headland. I'm the place. I'm the buckle. I don't let this fire no sticky matches. Oops. I forgot it. Sorry, I blew it again. Let's go back. Figure out it. Okay. He's out.
Hey.
I'm off to get the mail.
George station.
He won't see me. All he'll see is fabulous.
I don't believe you.
That's enough. I'll tell you what you want to know.
Don't they give you haircuts on work?
No, we try to avoid them because of.
All right. I'm sorry.
Bean, Howard. Bean. There's a nail on the set.
me go back to the field. I gotta get it.
I screwed up.
Do you, Holly? Oops. Thank you, Pops, for a good time. I'm ready now. It's all set, Mr. Storm. No more pressure. I fear didn't want to go in, but yeah, no, wait.
There's no water from Colorado.
Who says we stayed in Colorado? Here's some shells. We're going to the waterfront. Oh, wait a minute.
Where is yourself? You must have had to beat up a lot of American men to get this card. Why does that make you giggle? Did you not have to beat them off?
You
Been a
have
big
to get the role. There was imagine there was quite a few men up for the role as well. There were.
And compose yourself. You must have had to beat off a lot of American men. The guests leave the Airbnb after checkout.
So usually how it's left after they check out. So it don't look too bad. Ain't too much to clean up. They done pretty much wash the dishes, cleaned up everything themselves. Only thing that really be messed up is, you want to freshen the bathroom up, wash the towels, and you might want to clean the linen. So that the only thing that's really messed up in here is that.
How the guests leave the Airbnb?
That Subway? No, because you just gave me a foot long.
What does that mean? You know what it means. You know what I mean? Where you going, bro? Why are you backing up like that? I meant like a boner. That was a joke.
Already over?
The cast decided one night to try to slip in the word luge wherever they could without telling me. And normally as a stage manager, I frown upon that stuff.
Oh, and adding words to the script is
Yeah.
frowned upon?
Oh, no, they had to, they didn't, it had to work. It had to scan, you know, so my favorite was this one character who goes up to the female character with this beautiful necklace in a velvet box and opens it up and shows it to her. And the line, of course, is "Lo, the necklace." And he said, "Luge the necklace." That one was great.
That's a good one.
You've ever seen Super
So you
Troopers?
just
They
saw
do that
it?
with the word meow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to ask you a couple questions.
When I got downstairs at the end of the show and I walked into the dressing room and I said to them, "Hey, what's up with those luges?" And everybody's staring at me like, "Oh, she's gonna go ballistic." And I said, "I counted 57. Did I get them all?" They're like, "No, you missed two."
You missed two.
Is it a love letter, by the way?
Is it to you?
No, we all got one.
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Oh, you just haven't looked close enough. This is your friendly reminder, the mic is now on.
Sorry.
No, I don't.
Oh, is it money?
So,
No.
and
Tell
Teddy,
me
if you
it's
can
mine.
make me be a co-presenter, if I'm
Did
not
you
able
read
to
it?
right now,
Ah,
just because I was asked by Mr. LePage to show the ordinance when he's to speak.
Is
to
it anonymous?
Thank you. One, two, three, four, five.
Who's the weeds?
That's Sam.
Sam.
Okay.
I was like,
Well, I can't read it from here and it's
You're kidding
too
me.
small there too. Oh, good, that'll help.
Lovely flowers.
Wildflowers.
Okay, so it is 7 o'clock and everyone is here, so I'll call the meeting to order. Are there any adjustments for the agenda? Hearing and seeing none. We'll just keep
What was
on.
the question? Are there-
Any adjustments to the agenda?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to make a couple. Sorry to be so gappy. I was hoping we could move the ARPA process thing up, only because it's the last thing on the agenda. It strikes me as being very important. And I'd rather it be at a time when it has at least my full attention.
Sure. How about we move it up after the warning for the. So for there after the first, because the warning is at a specific time, so.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, we also have Fred Duplessis who's going to present. I'd suggest we do it right after the audit presentation.
So F is after B, which is the FY21 audit presentation. So we're moving up a couple of those.
okay. And then I'd also like to, and I don't know what the process is, make a request to change the time of the budget meeting on Saturday, and I don't know where that.
Yeah, let's just note it now and try to take care of that. So Mel said that she would be out of town later on in the afternoon. And would we be willing to meet at 10 rather than noon on Saturday for the budget?
Yeah, I'm open anyway.
Is that a concern with anyone?
No problem here.
Okay, and
That's fine.
Michael. Okay, and Michael, I believe presents will all be wrapped by that time? Okay,
So 10 works?
so 10 works. Steve, just want to make sure that works for you too?
Anytime works for me.
Okay,
Oh, beautiful, thank you.
That went so well.
okay. Anything else? Okay,
Oh, gee, yeah, Jake has.
sure.
Yeah, Mayor, I was just wondering if we could add after new business, just a discussion of the upcoming meetings and a preview of potential agenda items. Just since we're going into the holidays, I want to make sure I have everything on my schedule. Right, and to pick up the executive session on personnel that we didn't have time for last meeting.
And I'm putting both of those on. So 9G for discussion on upcoming meetings. And under the executive session as needed, we will have personnel. Okay, anything else? Okay, hearing and seeing none. I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Are you gonna have discussion?
I just have to want to include the licenses that are a part of the consent agenda. I sent this list around earlier today. The food establishments, we've got Delicate Decadence, Espresso Bueno, and the Community Kitchen Academy at Capstone. Food takeout, we've got the 2 Cumberland Farms locations. Waste disposal collectors, we've got Casella Waste Management with 16 pickup vehicles and MK Trucking with 3 drop-off vehicles. And under commercial swimming pools, we've got the rehab gym. Those are all included in the consent agenda.
Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, nay. Thank you very much. Moving on to the city clerk and treasury report. Carol.
Just a couple things, a continuing reminder that there is information on the election sections of the city website about the upcoming town meeting election with regards to the offices that are up for election for the city, for the Barre Unified Union School District, and the Central Vermont Public Safety Authority, along with blanks of the nominating petitions and consent candidate forms. Another thing, the water and sewer bill went out the beginning of this month and is due by the 3rd of January because the 31st of December falls on a Friday when City Hall will be closed. So the next business day is the 3rd of January. And then lastly, just to let you all know, I have been spending quality time with the planning committee for the Central Vermont Career Center, which is working on the articles of agreement for their hope to create a separate school district for the Career Center, made up of the 18 sending towns, which includes Barre City, Barrytown, and 16 others. Mainly with an eye towards what the election processes are going to be moving forward. I have not been successful in getting the changes I hoped we would be able to get in place. The biggest concern having to do with physically commingling ballots to be able to count them, which means on town meeting nights, clerks from as far away as Moortown and Facein and Cabot need to bring their ballots here to Barre City to be counted. Physically.
Oh, they love that.
Yeah, everybody's happy about it. Particularly, imagine what kind of weather we can have on an early March Tuesday night and it's, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And when they get here, it's going to be at least an hour. And so it is going before the State Board of Education tomorrow, and I'm going to be at that meeting just as a final Hail Mary. But I'm not hopeful since they took a vote last night and the results were like 8-1 against me. So I'm not hopeful. But we'll do the best that we can. At the very least, commingling of ballots is required for this meeting that would create the district. So we know that we've got to do it this year. My hope is that there will be a legislative change that will allow us to actually commingle the ballots during the 10 days following the election so that we can do it in the light of day and schedule it, and know which communities are coming when. And so that's what we're going to be pushing for. So that's that's on my radar. We're also trying to get some issues answered around the Barre Unified Union School District elections, because the articles of agreement are silent on the process once the initial board is established. And we're trying to get somebody to give us some legal ruling with regards to process. Haven't been successful on that yet. Everybody keeps punting. So this is my world.
We're just living in it, Karen.
Exactly. I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So any questions for the clerk or treasurer? And the only thing I would add is that the deadline for the BUSD vacancy is tomorrow at noon. And if you have anything to submit, it is submitted to the city clerk.
Haven't received any submissions?
We've got 2 so
Okay.
far. So, yep. And I will forward them to the school board, or am forwarding them to the school board, they're planning on doing interviews at their meeting on the 16th, and then coming next week to make a recommendation to council for appointment. So,
Thank you. Anything for liquor control?
Yep. We have a new first-class license application for the Paramount Theater. They have a liquor license in Montpelier at the Capitol, and they have applied for a similar one here. I did just want to share with you, Interim Chief Larry Eastman we require both police and fire department approval to bring liquor licenses forward. We got fire department approval, and then Larry was a little concerned about the rules as they exist with regards to lighting in establishments that serve alcohol, staff watching service and consumption, et cetera. He exchanged emails. He spoke with Department of Liquor Control. He spoke with Richard Bashara, who's our point of contact for the Paramount. And the responses that he got, Larry is comfortable saying, yes, I approve it. However, with the condition that they will continue to watch and make sure both they and the Department of Liquor Control, or Liquor and Lottery, will continue to monitor. So he does bring it forward with the recommendation to approve under those conditions.
Okay, any questions? Okay. Looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay.
Same.
And the abstention is noted. Thank you very much. Okay, anything else for liquor control?
Nope.
Moving on to the city manager's report. Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I had to step away from my computer, so I just wanted to check, did the council vote the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing to add to my report, but I do have a correction. In the report, I was advising of the schedule of the wastewater structure review, and I said that we would be prepared to make recommendations to the council on or before the February 24th council meeting. That was a typo. It should have been the February 4th council meeting. So I just want to make that correction. And that's all I had.
Any questions for the manager? Okay, hearing none. Moving on to visitors and communications. Is there an item that is not on the agenda that somebody would like to speak about? Okay, hearing and seeing none. We did have a letter from Bernadette, and I'm just going to let my computer say it's not responding right now for a little bit. But Bernadette had responded based on our volunteer appreciation at last night, right here in council and remotely. So I was going to read that, but I can send that around for council so that they can see it, since my computer is doing its thing. So then moving on, there's no old business. We do have warned for 7:15 the first reading of the animal and fowl ordinance. It is 7:12, so we're 3 minutes early. But with that, I believe the conversation will last more than that 3 minutes. So if nobody is opposed, we can start the conversation. We can know who's here, and if there's anyone that is in addition, at 7:15, I'll note that that conversation is underway. So, Mr. LePage, come on up. So this is warrant for 7:15. It is the 2021-06 first reading of Chapter 3 Animal and Fowl Ordinance. John LePage is representing the Animal and Fowl Task Force that we had set up. And he had asked that I also present the ordinance on the screen so that everybody can see. So I'm going to pull it up as well. So welcome, John.
Well, welcome everyone, and congratulations on all the part of everyone involved in this to get to the point where it is. There's been a lot of good work put in this, not only the task force and all the interested persons in that are affected by this, but our health officer and just all the way around. This is just an amazing accomplishment, and I'm honored to be here representing this.
Well, thank you. So as part of the discussion, we did want to note that this did have review from our city attorney. He did make some changes, and those changes were sent back so that the group was aware of them. I don't know if, John, if you wanted to go over a brief overview of items first, and then I can point out those other ones afterward. And I will be pulling it up here on the screen. So if you would like to look at the screen as well, we can do that.
Looking it over it, I just all I see is like vast improvement over where we used to be. So if you have some specific items that you mentioned that were brought to your attention, bring it on.
Okay. So really, it was within the. My computer will move. You know, it's always on the day that you decide to present something that's something
That everything goes south.
Yeah. So in the definition section, there was an addition in here for indigenous animals. It means wild animals that are native to Vermont. That was one item that was mentioned because indigenous animals were mentioned in the ordinance itself. There was another one added for state or state law shall mean Vermont, just because it wasn't being specific within the document itself. So those were added. Section, I think it's now numbered 319, referred to cruelty to animals. And that was an item that, since it's not relative to this ordinance, it's actually a state law separate from this ordinance. The attorney suggested that we remove it. So other than that, the changes are before you, council. I think that the Animal and Fowl Task Force did a great job of reviewing all of the items that we had suggested. And with that legal review, I think that completes all those items. So
The one comment I would make is that I formatted this for tonight, and there are a few sub letter and number headings that will need to be adjusted. And just know that I know that, and we'll make those adjustments in the next draft. So,
thank you. Councilor Booton?
Yes, can you go down to section 313?
Section 313. Yep, here you go.
So it says after second violation, the offending animal must be removed from the city limits, either by euthanasia or rehoming. So the Animal Control Committee has that authority to do that. I don't know. I mean, I understand the rationale behind it, because you don't want animals biting people. I'm just, I would love to hear the reasoning behind that, and because at this point it must be removed, and it's my understanding that means that there's no option.
The way it is written, correct. If there was a second offense, it would be an automatic that the violation, the outcome would be that the offending animal would be removed in one of those two manners.
So then I would ask,
Okay,
why
John?
did the committee choose to have a 2 strikes and then you're out for the dog? Or
That
anybody?
seems to be the intent, by the wording, that seems fairly clear. And I'm wondering if there's anyone who feels like second strike should be anything other than your last one. A bite by an animal is not a light issue. You know, and I expect that would not come into play under too many circumstances, not like that we have not had that problem in the city before. But I think that with a stipulation like this, it sends a clear message that if your animal is apt to be inclined for this kind of behavior, that it's incumbent on you to make sure that you prevent this from happening, leash or, you know, containment, you know, in a yard or some other way. It's a very serious issue. There's little children who are traumatized for life by an animal bite, and some people with serious health problems. I almost feel like that stipulation is not heavy enough. But that's what we have, and I have a hard time imagining going any softer on that.
Okay, Heather Runk, and just to note, Heather's also been a part of the Animal and Fowl Task Force.
I just want, the reason why that was added specifically, it was a request from the health officer to put it in like that. That was, I believe that was his wording.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Now that you mentioned that, I do recall that, the impetus for that. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Councilor Booton?
So the Animal Control Committee does have that authority to do that. I'm not particularly supportive of it must be done. I mean, I don't know what the circumstances are of a second or, you know, the violation. I think that, you know, the Animal Control Committee has that authority. And I'm not overly interested, I'm not overly excited about, you know, restricting that.
Okay, understood. Were there any other items on the ordinance, Councilor Booton, that you were looking at?
No, I mean, I saw the almost the entire section of the chicken portion of it was removed, and I understand the reasoning behind it. You're moving towards a more of a, you know, how about you be a good neighbor kind of feel. It worked for us up until like 2013, and then, you know, it didn't work for us, and let's try it again.
Okay. So any other questions from council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I had one question about the variance process. I think I recall in the last version that there was an opportunity for the health officer to sign off on variances, and that's still the case, right?
So just point me to the section, and if.
Yeah, I saw it earlier and now I can't find it.
It's a list, and I thought I didn't see
Yeah.
the list yet.
Well, I saw that it was
So the
added as a
variance is in the
power.
ACC section.
Yeah, section 3-24, rule on variance requests. So under that section, once the committee is established, part of their powers to address the rules of variance requests. So I don't believe it would fall to the health officer. I think it would fall to the committee as a whole to address those.
Okay, and was that a change by the attorney? I could have sworn I saw a version today that had the health officer signing off on variance requests.
This was not. This was
No.
added in by the committee or by the task force.
All right, sounds good.
So I believe the other Heather is asking about raising a hand. And if you have, you're on mute right now. So if you can unmute. There you go, there
Hi,
you go.
yeah, sorry, I feel like I've done that before, but I can't figure it out tonight, and it's so handy that everyone's raising their hand to be called on. I wish I could do that as well, but yeah, I just wanted to add to Michael's point about the poultry section, not only, the desire to sort of make it neighbor friendly, but also to just wanted to point out that it also applies rules across animals in the city. Previously, the poultry section had a page and a half of rules just for poultry that when we looked at it actually made sense for most animals. So we, tried to incorporate that or eliminate it if it seemed, unnecessary. Yep, that's it. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, just to answer Heather's questions, if you move your cursor down to the bottom menu, if you click on the reactions icon, you'll see the hand raising.
Yeah, sometimes people clap their hands instead. Either way, we'll recognize.
Yeah,
it.
either way.
Councilor Wazizak.
So Heather, just a quick follow-up to that. So did I just understand what you said correctly in that the rules which the committee thought were good to be incorporated across different animals were incorporated just other places in the ordinance?
That's right. Yeah, we moved a lot to nuisance animals.
Okay.
And also just, there were things in the poultry section like you must provide water, which we felt like, was animal cruelty section would cover that if you're not providing water. I mean, there was a lot of unnecessary things in the section on poultry previously that we moved to various sections to incorporate it and apply it to all animals, like the fencing limit and things like that. But a lot of it we just decided also was covered in other sections by default, so didn't need to actually be explicit about.
You can go to Michael first. Councilor Booten.
Yeah, so to circle back on the biting section, I think that the Animal Control Committee has that authority to do that. I would like to take that out as a separate item if we're going to vote for that one.
So before passing on to a second reading, we can have that conversation, but I think that we would want to address it first rather than after. So is there, Michael, are you looking for a motion to strike that sentence in that section?
I am.
Okay.
So
Is there
I mean, I'd make that motion.
So is this the biting section?
This is the biting section.
313.
So
Yeah.
Just to make sure that this is clear, you're looking to remove the underlined line in section 313.
That is correct.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. So for discussion,
So just for clarity and explanation as to why I want to do this, to me, I feel like a person that has a dog that can be trouble. I think that having the ACC being able to make determinations based on circumstances is probably the best way versus must be removed from the city limits.
Councilor Hemrick.
Yeah, some of my reasoning behind supporting Councilor Booten's motion is that, and in support of Mr. LePage's testimony that, a bite's a very serious thing. The Animal Control Committee has met twice in the past 2 years at least, or a year. And I think on both occasions, there has been an order that relates to rehoming or removal from the city limits. or at least on the first occasion. And I know, I've been bit as a child by a dog. And certainly known a lot of, young children that have been mauled by dogs, and including in my role as a health officer in another town. And I don't want to set the expectation that the Animal Control Committee doesn't have the option to opt for euthanasia or rehoming on the first instance of a very bad attack. And it could still do it after a second violation. But I'm a little concerned that this might set the expectation we would only do that after there've been 2 bites. And there may be circumstances of a case where you want to do that on the first instance. And I could see an owner of an animal that has bit another person pointing to this and saying, well, no, you should really only do that on the second instance. And so that's why I would have that taken out.
Counselor Stockwell?
Counselor Hemrick discussed some of my concerns. If there's a very serious bite in one incident, there should be some ability of the Animal Control Committee to make sure that dog is safe, that dog is removed, that can't happen again, because one bite can be extremely serious and do a lot of damage.
Thank you. Steve? Oh. Steve, you're on mute and your hand is up.
Sorry about that. My comment was on the poultry section, so stay on this section until you're done.
Okay. So any other, Counselor Shambell?
I also was bitten as a kid, and I love dogs, but I am very careful around them, and I also run around Barre a fair amount. And I meet dogs that are out of control, and it's frightening if a dog is charging you. And for little kids to have a big dog coming at you, and yes, Counselor Hemrick is correct. Children who get mauled, adults that get mauled. I think we all have to be vigilant about that. Not everybody has the same standard of expectation for dog behavior. My former mother-in-law was a dog trainer. Her rule was 1 bite, the dog's gone. And it's a hard call. I understand people loving their dogs, but the negative fallout can be just so heartbreaking.
Answer real.
I'm a dog lover. I've never been bit by a dog, but I also know you have to look at each dog bite as a circumstance, and look at all around. Some dogs bite for different reasons. So a dog could be just a bad dog, or it could be a bad owner. So I think you have to look at all the case around a dog bite. And I agree, dog bites are very serious. But again, there are very bad owners out there. So I would look at all the case around the dog.
John?
I get the point about first bite, if it's a bad scenario, being able to kind of take the bull by the horns and saying, okay, this is kind of over the top. We don't need a second instance in something as serious as this. I absolutely hear that, and I agree. My only reservation is like, this has been dragging on for a long time. Most of us are ready to move it through, but the point is valid. And so that means probably there's gonna have to be redone and yet another presentation, another first reading.
I don't think so. I think once we make the changes, we would pass it on to second reading with the changes as noted. And then we would look for no further changes at that second reading. And at that point, that we would be.
Shall I start doing cartwheels now?
No, not yet. Right, so we do have a motion, which is the removal of this section.
So trying to thread the needle here, and it's probably not going to work because it doesn't actually address Councilor Booton's concerns. I don't support the motion of taking this out of the ordinance, but I would like to add in a sentence that says something along the lines of like, this does not prevent the Animal Control Committee from ordering the removal or euthanasia of a animal after the first bite.
Understood. So we do have a motion. Any further discussion? So just to
Mr. Mayor?
reiterate.
Mr. Mayor,
Who is speaking?
this is Howie, Health Officer.
Oh, hi Howie, how are you doing?
Good, yourself, sir.
Good.
So, sorry to jump in. I totally understand where the council people are coming from. The reason I wanted that put in there was just so I had something, my foot in the door, kind of, so to speak, so that I have some way to deal with a problem dog. Most dogs, I think, their first bite is generally just a, mistake, they got scared, whatever. And like, I can't remember who it was, there are bad dogs and there are bad owners. The only thing is, what are we using as a criteria? Because if we add that sentence in saying, they could be euthanized or rehomed after one, what are we using as the criteria of what's bad enough to make it, them be euthanized or rehomed on the first bite, as opposed to letting them go to, saying it was an accident and, is it the amount of damage? Is it the medical bill? Is it what is the criteria? What line has to be crossed in order for that dog to be euthanized or whatever on the first strike? Thank you.
Councilor Wazasek.
Michael was first.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Booton.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, what is the definition of a dog bite where we're concerned about, and because based on what I'm seeing here, and I might be incorrect, but if somebody is on your property and they bite you, am I correct on that? That counts as an offense. My dog, I have trained my dog. I have spent hundreds of dollars in training my dog. And you come onto my property, he's gonna get very excited now, and bark at you. But I'm concerned we're setting a standard where we might be putting someone's dog down or rehoming somebody's dog because of, I don't know. I think of Chihuahuas, which, you put your hand next to one and they automatically bite you. I'm concerned about that.
Right. If your dog bites someone on your property, that's not illegal. Or if you're in your vehicle and a dog, somebody reaches in for whatever reason and your dog nips them, if it's on your property, the dog is safe because the dog is protecting you, protecting the property. It's only when the dog is, say, off your property, on the sidewalk, in the street, then it bites somebody, then it becomes an issue.
So, Howie, what you just gave for an explanation, that's not included in this section on animal bites. So if right now it just reads after this has happened twice, after the bites have happened twice, then this is automatic. So are there other criterion that should be added in this section to either clarify that, or should this, I think what the motion would be is remove this section because it still would be an action that could be taken by the Animal Control Board or committee.
Correct. It's just that if we don't have something in writing, I just foresee a neighbor dispute, your dog bit me, I want him gone. And either way, it would just go to the Animal Control Committee and they would end up deciding on it. I'm just trying to limit how many people are knocking on the door of the Animal Control Committee saying they want a hearing because of a dog bite, especially for the Mickey Mouse stuff.
Understood. So Councilor Wazazak.
Yeah, so the one point I will make is that dog bites are generally, I'd say they're pretty rare. Serious ones are pretty rare, but they're very, very personal. Dog ownership is very personal. The relationship between owner and dog is very personal. The relationship between neighbors is very personal. And if there is an instance where a dog bites, attacks, what have you, a neighbor, let's say a neighbor's child, that child may not sleep well again until that dog is removed from the property. And if this goes to an animal control committee that takes a council meeting to get set up and then warned and then what have you, we have a potentially dangerous situation going on for quite a long time. And I'll get back to this later, but I have a similar concern about the variance process as to why I think that should be empowered to the health officer too. But I think that Howie's right, that having some language like this in there for him to remove a dog from a dangerous situation could be important.
Counselor Stockwell?
Couldn't it read that any dog that bites sufficiently to need stitches, if the wound needs stitches, that would be a time when you'd consider removing the dog either by euthanasia or rehoming? So it's not just a nip, but if you get a bite from a dog that needs stitches, that's pretty serious.
I would say that, some bruising can occur and blood is not drawn. I think of a lot of internal type wounds that can happen, especially with teeth. Heather.
Hi, yeah, so originally this section said that you basically just have to notify the city health officer. It doesn't necessarily explicitly say that that city health officer will then take it to the animal control committee for a decision on what to do with the animal. So I guess perhaps it should say something along that lines that, animal bites will be reviewed by the animal control committee, after the second violation, the offending animal must be removed. And that way it's clear that it's getting reviewed, but 2 strikes you're out is kind of the rule. Now, if it's a frivolous complaint, the first time around, like if somebody reaches their hand into someone's fence and the dog bites them, then technically there wasn't a first violation, right? Because it was a frivolous complaint. So I wonder if that could be some sort of compromise here.
Thank you. Howie, was there any other input you wanted to give on that before we move on?
No, I just want, as long as we have something in there that allows us to remove a dog from the city if it's a problem dog.
I just was going up to the definitions to see if there was something that defined a violation. So, and I didn't see anything.
There's Article 3, Administration, Appeals, and Enforcement, starting with Section 3-7.
Section 3-7, you said?
Yeah,
Okay. So I'm going to scroll down to that section.
yeah, you're probably looking at what's in 3-8 is probably what you that's enforcement, process, appeals, and penalties.
So, with that as the definition, if it's not a violation because it's on your property, if it's not a violation because it was frivolous, then that would not result in that first case to lead to the second case. Councilor Hemrick?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just point to the definition of a vicious animal, which I think if applied to that section may address some of the concerns. It says a vicious animal shall mean any animal which attacks or bites a person or other domestic pet while the animal is off the premises of the owner or keeper and the person or pet attacked or bitten requires medical attention. Vicious animal complaints shall be investigated pursuant to Section 324, which points down to the Animal Control Committee section. But if you referenced in Howie's edit a vicious animal, a second bite by a vicious animal, that might solve the problem.
So just going back to that section.
Because any animal bite, you should seek medical attention from either, just getting a antibiotic shot, whether or not you're talking about rabies shots. I mean, any animal bite, you should have medical attention. So technically any animal bite could fall into the vicious animal. Where they could then say on the first attack, you know, the first bite that, you know, something needs to be done, the animal needs to be removed. Or it might have just been a simple, you surprised the dog and it just reacted normally.
Heather? Oh, Michael?
Yeah, I would, the vicious animal, adding that into there would definitely be something that I would feel a lot more comfortable about. Listen, I mean, like I said, I think of dogs that, I mean, even taking things out of your hand, I mean, yeah. I mean,
So-
sometimes they bite when they're taking things out of your hand. Anybody
It
that's
sounds
had a
like-
dog knows that.
Okay, well, we
No
do
matter
have
how
a
many
motion.
times you say gentle.
There is to be an amendment to the motion. It sounds like it would be in that line where it says after second violation, the offending vicious animal must be removed. Just throwing that out there just for thought while we continue conversation. Councilor Shambo?
At the risk of being emotional or unemotional, whatever it looks like, I personally don't like the splitting hairs when a dog, even a very kind dog, because many people see their dogs as really lovely animals, but certain things can set a dog off where they may not be vicious most of the time, but they do vicious things. And I don't see the sense in messing around. If the dog has bitten, I really believe it has to be looked at, and it is serious, period. I don't want to split hairs about it.
Sure. And I'll try to have this wrap up. Michael, is this one last comment on this section? No? Okay, head is shaking. So the motion on the floor currently is to remove the section that is underlined in section 313, which relates to the second violation.
I would offer a friendly amendment, if it's okay with the mover and seconder, to, rather than striking the sentence, keep the sentence in, but amend it to read vicious animal. I guess.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
So fine too with you, Jake?
And Teddy, would you include also the statement that the Animal Control Committee retains the authority to euthanize or rehome a dog in the first instance?
Yeah, that's fine with me too. As long as it's fine by
And I'm
Michael.
okay with that.
All right, so can you give the exact wording again?
So I think a sentence before the second violation
Yeah.
that just states, the Animal Control Committee has the authority to, and then Jake, you can,
Remove from city limits either by euthanasia or rehoming on the first violation. And then maybe, and after the second violation, the vicious animal must be removed from city limits either by euthanasia or rehoming.
that makes sense to me.
It sounds like a reasonable compromise.
So, and I heard, Michael, that sounds like you are fine with that as an adjustment, and that's fine with the seconder. Any other discussion? So again.
Mr. Mayor, it's Howie again.
Yes, Howie.
I would ask that you put in some benchmarks then for it to be bumped up, like I said it previously, to the first offense. Because, I mean, just seeking medical attention, like I said before, everybody should seek medical attention on a dog bite, which would mean any dog bite could then become a first offense for the committee to meet. And on average, I get about 10 a month. I don't know how often the committee wants to meet, but you really need some language in there so you don't get bombarded by requests, I think.
So by referring back to the vicious animal versus just an animal, we've tried to clarify that section. I think the intent that I've been hearing from council is that it could be even after the first incident, the first attack, where the animal would either have to be removed or euthanized. And so Howie, have you seen situations where you believed after the first incident, the animal should be removed?
Yes.
So looking at the process, I think the clarifying language here was just stating that that could occur if it is violent enough based on the review by the Animal Control Committee, then that could still happen. But a second offense by that same animal means that it would have to be removed.
Right. But just going by the vicious animal definition, any animal which bites or attacks a person or other domestic pet while the animal is off premises of the owner or keeper, and the person or pet attacked or bitten requires medical attention. I'm saying everyone requires medical attention. So without putting some kind of benchmark in there of, how much medical attention, do you need surgery? Do you need, something more than just medical attention? Because everyone's going to fall into that caveat, is what I'm trying to say.
So I'm just looking back at the vicious animal.
May not be an issue, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the vicious animal definition here because that's what, currently we're going back to this as that defining piece. So as written, it says that a couple things have to happen. The animal has to either attack or bite a person or an animal on off premise of the owner or the keeper. And also the person or pet attacked or bitten requires medical attention. So would there be any other qualifications that this would be not a vicious animal based on, and if we had that in the definition, I think that would help clarify it.
I think Heather has it.
I don't have any other definitions. It's just that all bites that we would be looking at would be, that I would be doing anything about would be off premises, and that everyone should be getting medical attention. So pretty much every one of those, any dog bite would be a first bite, considered for a first offense, to be rehomed or euthanized, no matter how little damage is done. If they break the skin, you should go get seen by a doctor. You didn't have your arm ripped off, it's just a small bite, but that would still fall under your first offense for rehoming or euthanization.
Heather?
I think the way that I heard the proposed rewriting of this sentence was that if there's an animal bite, you call the city health officer and report it. If the decision by the city health officer is to remove the animal from city property by some means, wouldn't that owner perhaps get a hearing request a hearing by the Animal Control Committee to get a second opinion on that or whatever? Like, I feel like the intent here is to say, the committee can decide to, if the city health officer says this is a vicious bite and needs to be rehomed, that's when the committee would get involved in case the person wanted a hearing on that. I don't think we should, I'm wondering if, going back to the splitting hairs, we should just strike this sentence and say decisions are of the city health officer and, can be appealed to the Animal Control Committee or something, in case there's, under the circumstances of rehoming and things like that. Because it is a big situation when you're in it and it's your pet, on a first offense to have a bite. But if it's a relatively minor bite versus a major bite, then I think that's where we're getting at here in terms of what the process is and allowing the city health officer to make a decision. But I think people would probably want to have, their chance to say their piece on it if there was some sort of mistake.
Councilor Hamrick, you had your hand up first and then, no, so Mr. LePage?
To Heather's point, and not really in opposition to what Howie's saying here, I understand his desire to have some benchmarks here. I happen to feel like there's in this circumstance where we're obviously wrestling with the splitting hairs issue, that at some point we have to realize that we are depending on discretion, human discretion and compassion on both sides of the fence. The owner of the offending animal, the person or persons who have been bitten. And I would like to think that as a body that this council could understand and be on board with the notion that our appointed officials, appointed and elected officials have the capacity and integrity to use sound judgment in these things, and that the Animal Control Committee would be equivalent to a jury. So it's not like it's hinging on one person. We're talking about the discretion and compassion of a group of people. And I would assume it would take a majority, a little bit like a council motion. And I'm in favor of really depending on reasonable discretion at the hands of these people involved. I can see that it's looking like a vicious circle here, that there's no way to come up with an absolute wording solution to this, that we must be in a position of depending on reasonable discretion, which we're working with the assumption that that's there. And if there's anyone participating in this who feels like our health officer is incapable, or the animal control people are incapable of such discretion, I'd like to hear why.
So I'm just going down to the section 3-24, which is the language around the Animal Control Committee. So that group shall hold appeal hearings for animal and fowl ordinance violations. So if there's a violation, there's going to be a determination from the health officer. And that determination is what's to come before the Animal Control Committee. And it sounds like if we kept the language as is, there can be a determination after the first one. There would be a determination after the second one, but it would be binding by that Animal Control Committee because that's what it stated in an ordinance. So I'm leaning more toward just removing it altogether, because right now you're just appealing to this Animal Control Committee. The health officer would be able to make those judgment calls based on, the severity of the case. This gives that appeal process for the health officer. But that's just me.
So you, just for clarification, you said you're leaning toward removing 313.
That section in 313, just because it then does not provide language that determines one way or another. Councilor Hemrick?
If I'm hearing Howie right, the health officer, it's that he's looking for an authority for a second bite animal to be able to say, no, it's these are your options. You need to rehome this animal, or you can choose euthanasia. And so it sounds like really the wording that he's asking for is that after the second violation, the health officer may order the offending animal to be removed from city limits, and then that decision can still be appealed to the Animal Control Committee.
I think that must versus a may is a really good defining word here, because that's true. Right now it's saying it has to happen. And I think, Howie, you can speak to this too, but it sounds like you're looking for guidance that would say that your recommendation to the Animal Control Committee would be the animal must be removed or euthanized if the second bite were to occur. Howie, are you still there?
Yeah, yep. What I was looking for was just that people request the to go before the committee, so that if they were able to request it on the first offense, there's a potential that a lot more people would be doing it on the first offense, just because for minor injuries. That's all I was looking for, was some benchmark to separate what ones you would deal with on a first offense compared to what ones you deal with on a second offense. That was all I was looking for. But yeah, as far as, you know, the removal or the euthanation of someone's pet, I personally would rather have that come from members of the city council than just myself. I mean, yes, I could order it, and then you guys could do the appeal, whichever way you want to, whichever way works for you folks. Just I don't want to be the only one saying that this has to be done. I'd like somebody from the city, you know, voted officials to finally have the final say.
I will withdraw my previous amendment.
Counselor Booton?
So where are we on this?
So right now,
'Cause-
313, and the language added in here would be a section added before the second violation stating that
We don't have a motion to that effect. At the moment, though, as far as motions are concerned, we have a motion to remove that sentence.
Okay.
And that's where we are.
Yeah, because
So is it
was
possible,
friendly
in-
amended.
I think the,
Yes, but he just withdrew his amendment.
but it had to be first
Right.
accepted by the person who first and seconded with Michael and Jake. So it'd
They
be-
already accepted it.
right, they accepted including the additional language. So I just want to make sure that that's what's currently there is what was accepted by Counselor Booton and Counselor Hemrick, which includes a sentence that's added to this, which would be a first violation stating that there could be action for removal, and then the second statement that says that it must be removed. So Counselor Booton, sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to clarify that before moving forward.
That's what I just went through.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so.
okay. So currently we're at
He's
removing this
offering
section.
another friendly amendment to remove that. So it's up to the mover and seconder if they want to accept that second friendly amendment.
To remove after second violation, the offending animal must be removed from the city limits.
I'm completely
To-
confused.
Yeah, see, I don't
to
want to
remove
confuse.
Well, and
the-
that's the problem. Like, I'm a little confused on this as well.
At the moment, with the friendly amendment, the language reads, after it's, before the section that's added, it says the animal control authority has the authority to remove from city limits by euthanasia or rehoming. And after second violation, the offending vicious animal must be removed from the city limits. That's where we are at the moment.
So in fact, it's stronger language.
It is, yes. So Counselor Booton, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that? Or can we move to a vote?
So the question for you is, if the second violation comes along, somebody can appeal that to the ACC, correct?
All of these can be appealed to the Animal Control
So
Committee.
then that's fine. I'll just leave it. That's fine.
And I'm fine too with that as seconder.
So Michael and Jake, you both have accepted the friendly amendment by Teddy to remove that language. So that now the additional language. So now where we're back to is the original motion, which is to remove the sentence.
To remove what?
The sentence, the new sentence in 313.
Michael, is that your understanding?
Let's just vote on it and.
We need to
so I'll-
clarify before we vote on it, Michael.
Yes, we're removing the sentence and we'll just leave it at that, and then we'll vote on that and then move forward.
And is that,
Yeah, and I support this because the animal or the health officer always has the authority to seize an animal, and that decision can always be appealed to the Animal Control Committee.
Okay.
Is my understanding. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that language already exists in the
Yeah,
ordinance.
so, and then the Animal Control Committee has dealt with these issues and is able to take these actions as necessary.
okay, any other discussion?
Just one more question,
Heather had her hand up.
because I'm not sure I'm getting it completely. Could you just read what the whole 313 sounds like?
So the 313 would be everything that's there except for what is underlined. That sentence is going to be removed.
So you're taking out after the second violation,
Yes.
and putting in its stead?
Nothing.
Nope, nothing. And then that gives the opportunity for the health officer to make a decision to do actions as necessary, and then have that appeal process through the Animal Control Committee. Okay, so all those in favor of removing that section from 313, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Noted. So other sections, Steve, I know you had a question about another section.
Poultry.
Yeah, section 318.
Okay. In which section, what part of it?
Well, keep going. I thought it was 318. Just, it's the section on poultry.
Yep.
It's the
Yeah,
new 318.
The new
It
eight,
was-
yes. So scroll down. Wait a minute. Okay, where you have the bold section, only female chickens are allowed. Continuing on, a variance may be requested in writing to the health officer. I think that's a editorial comment change, who will take into consideration any complaints from abutters and may bring any variance for consideration before the Animal Control Committee. And then down under the Animal Control Committee, 324, if you can go down there. So this says may bring. If you go down to 324. Yeah, okay. Item 9 says rule on variance requests. And I think it's unclear whether that clause is retaining the authority, retaining the sole authority by the Animal Control Committee to rule on variance requests, or is it to rule on variance requests that are forwarded by the health officer?
So my interpretation is that anything that would come before the Animal Control Committee would be based on the health officer. The health officer would bring whichever animal was biting or a rule on variance. So those are the categories here for the powers of the Animal Control Committee. This would be one of them, which the health officer would or may refer to them.
Right, but conversely, the health officer would still have the authority to rule on a variance request. It doesn't have to bring it to the Animal Control Committee. I don't care either way. It just strikes me as not being clear.
I would say that yes, it would be that it's a may, so the health officer has that authority. And then if they either have an appeal or there is a reason why they want to bring it before the Animal Control Committee, they can.
Would it be clear if we said, item 9, rule on variance requests forwarded by the health officer? I'll leave that to you folks.
Because it's usually the appeal that ends up.
Right. And it could be that it's just the Animal Control Committee shall hold appeal hearings, because right now it just says for violations. And it could be that it states variance requests up in that section. But
Yeah, so this was the same section. This was my other section that I had a question about. If I'm remembering correctly, when we talked about this with the full council last time, the intent of the council was to give the variance power to the health officer, with the Animal Control Committee having the ability to basically overrule the health officer or side with the health officer if that variance were contested. And that's what I would like this to get settled on.
318. Counselor Hemrick?
And so I currently read this section 318 to say that the health officer does not have the authority to rule on variances. But they may, but a person can request one in writing to the health officer who will take into consideration complaints. Oh, and then it says it may bring a variance for consideration. Okay, so I see the point that you made, Mayor. Even so, I mean, I don't like this language because variance is a zoning land use concept. And and I said it before, I'll say it again, that I think this should, the Development Review Board is much more equipped to handle these things. It gives interested parties notification of what's going on, that there's going to be a hearing related to what's going on with your neighbor next door, and that you need to show up and at that hearing, and there's certain criteria that you have to meet to have a variance. So, and as a member of the Animal Control Committee, I don't think I'd be very keen to have a whole bunch of variance requests when it's a council function, and we're already, I think, over meetinged as it is, and the Development Review Board doesn't meet that often. But I'm willing to kind of look past this in recognition that it'd be nice just to get this done and move it forward. But I am concerned about the whole approach to any variance at all.
Yeah, understood. And part of it's going to be trial and error, I think, on this to see how it actually plays out. Because if the health officer is making a variance determination, there's no reference here in consulting with other bodies. So
could I offer language after rule on variance requests forwarded by the health officer or upon appeal?
So state that again. And so we're in section 318 still?
No, he's in 324.
Sorry. Yeah, section 324B, powers of animal control committee 9. Rule on, my proposal would be to add the language, rule on variance requests forwarded by the health officer or upon appeal. That way, if the health officer is uncomfortable making a decision for whatever reason, they can forward it to the animal control committee for more input. Or if someone gets a request, it gets an answer they don't like, they can appeal it to the animal control committee.
So I'll take that in the form of a
A
motion.
motion, sure.
Is there a second?
I can second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. I'll just go down to that section then so that we're looking at it. And then discussion. So do you understand the change? Do you want to give a little more of an explanation of?
Yeah, so basically the wording I'm added is intended to have the effect that if somebody wants a variance, and I agree we should just call it an exception, but we're past that. If someone wants an exception to anything within this ordinance, they submit that to the health officer. If the health officer decides, this is a big decision, I'm not comfortable calling this on my own, we'll send it to the animal control committee and have a hearing. Or upon appeal, meaning if the animal control officer does issue a ruling, for lack of a better term, that the applicant does not like, they can appeal that to the animal control committee and have their day in animal control court.
Okay, so I have a question about that.
Sure.
Why have a rule if you can always overrule the final person who's there? I mean, if you don't have a buck stops here person in this world, you're going to have, well, I don't know if you're going to have chaos, but I lived on a semi farm. I know people love their animals, but animals are animals. Let's get real about it. And at a certain point, there needs to be a bottom line. And if you can always appeal the final ruling or the person who's in charge, why even bother to have the ordinance?
Well, this just gives that one additional activity. So the health officer may look for advice from the animal control committee, but it also can be an appeal process if someone feels that person has misjudged. So we see it in the court system quite a bit where there's an appeal process. I think Councilor Wozniak, the exception versus the variance would give it a different meaning and context. So an exception to an exception to this ordinance would mean something very different than if it was an exception in a variance, which is a zoning issue. So that's why I don't think to your point, I don't think that we would want to change the language if it's here, if we keep it. Councilor Hemrick.
A friendly amendment to, for Councilor Wazazak and Booton to consider is that the adjoining property owners would be notified of any health officer or animal control decision or health officer decision and have appeal rights and be notified of any hearing going before the animal control board and also maintain appeal rights. Because they're the ones who ultimately are the ones absorbing the impact of the variance, right? Not the person, not necessarily the applicant.
I feel like that was addressed in this somewhere.
It's in the zoning ordinance, but it's not in this ordinance. That's why, in, trying to apply a variance concept without those notification requirements and declaration of interested party status and the preservation and due process of rights. This process makes me a little nervous. And I certainly would want to know if my neighbor was requesting a variance.
Councilor Booton. Councilor Booton?
Yeah, why can't we just bunt it to the DRB then? I mean, if it's a variance and it's.
What's the DRB application fee? $150
For variance request?
for a hearing before the DRB?
Yeah.
I think it's $150.
So, Michael, if we did that, there would be it would be a fee request, and then with the DRB, they would be the body that would deal with variances. So it would not be the Animal Control Committee.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, if somebody wants a variance on whatever, somebody wants something, they're going to pay the $150 to get it. The DRB has the process set up. I think that's probably the best route to go.
So we have one. So it doesn't sound like there was a friendly.
So I am removing my second then.
Yeah, I'll withdraw the motion. I was just trying to find something that everyone can get on board on. That did not happen, so we'll move forward.
So just to try to wrap up that conversation though. So in this section here, 318, where it says a variance may be requested in writing to the health officer, I think officer's in there twice, but instead of it being a variance request to that person, it sounds like that a variance request would go to the DRB, and that there's already a process in place for a variance.
Correct. I think that's good, but Heather has a question.
Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, so and maybe I'm gonna ask if Howie would chime in, but this sentence reads that who will take in consideration and complaints from the abutters, which leads me to believe that if a variance was requested, the health officer would get in touch with the neighbors to let them know that a variance has been requested. I don't know how much the DRB knows about poultry and the requirements for raising poultry. A lot of this discussion that we had on the committee, just for some context on this section, was about, different kinds of birds are bigger and smaller, and you could have 3 dozen guinea hens or whatever, and they're the same size as a couple of, barred rocks. Like it's a different, situation. And so to say you can only have this many animals and etc. kind of doesn't allow for a little bit of nuance given the circumstances. So I think that's why we were trying to say, look, here are the rules, but if your circumstance is a little different, you can request a variance, who then will say, a neighbor who is in a densely populated area who wants to have, more than the types or whatever is different than someone who has a little bit more yard and isn't close by to neighbors. So I think that was just providing some flexibility. But it is my understanding that he would talk to the abutters of the property, which would address the concern.
Yeah, in this section, it does state with the variance, the health officer will take into consideration any complaints from abutters. But the question there is, if there is no complaints to date, there might be in the future. So it's not just taking in complaints, it's making sure that they're aware. And I think the DRB process, abutters are notified in such a request. So if there is a variance request, maybe I wanted to have a porch on my house and it goes too close to my neighbor's yard, they would be notified if I was going before the DRB for that request. So I think that's why the suggestion was made that it would go to the DRB rather than the health officer or the animal control. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I have my hand raised, but the yellow hand against the yellow wall doesn't show up very well. Sorry about that. I think by referring this variances to the DRB is just opening up a can of worms. It's complicating the process by now putting it before two bodies. I don't think the DRB is ready or equipped to do for something that deal with something that's entirely out of their domain. Poultry and variances that may go along with that. My recommendation is to keep it within the domain of the Animal Control Committee. And if there's a notification process required, then write that in here. Don't punt it to the DRB.
I have to be in 100% agreement with Manager McKenzie's take on this. I was about to go there to begin with, to bring this, and Heather touched on this too, to bring this into the DRB. Having your pets or your egg supply is not the same thing as having an addition on your structure that's going to impact boundaries. It's not in the same ballpark. The DRB is not even close to a body that could have any reasonable assessment of the impact on that. That's where the health officer and the animal control committee, that's why we're here, to deal with these things. And it seems to me that we are very close to coming up with language that does exactly that takes care of these concerns. And then to quickly address Emo's concern about having any sort of appeal process. I understand that we need rules to be followed, but I also understand that no rules and no enforcement is ever in a democratic society regarded as perfect. So appeals are only to address the potential for injustice. It's not to soften the intent or the effect of the rule. It's only to make sure that an applicant is not being overly egreged by the judgment.
Thank you. Councillor Stockwell?
I just don't think this would ever be a huge problem in Barre. I mean, there may be the occasional person who goes wild about chickens, but really, it's not like motorcycles going up and down the streets at 3 a.m. Or, it just seems like here's a variant, here's a process. It puts some guidelines in place. It allows people to have female chickens. I just don't think this is going to be a huge problem. I think as written, it's okay. It's not going to be there's not going to be a chicken catastrophe in Barre. And DRB is really overkill.
Councillor Booton, you had your hand up.
Yeah. Okay, fine. No DRB. What if we added in that afterwards saying that abutters will be notified? And I think that serves the purpose of notifying the abutters and they'll be notified of any type of variance request or any type of meeting.
So if we, in that section here where it says, a variance may be requested to the health officer who will notify abutters and take into consideration any complaints from, I gotta reword that.
Counselor Hemrick actually came up with language which he proposed earlier. Adjoining property owners shall be notified and maintain appeal rights to the Animal Control Committee.
So if we put that as a line at the end of this section, I'm going to take that as a motion.
Yeah, a motion.
Councilor Hemrick as a second.
Yeah, second, yeah.
Okay. So the only other thing for discussion here is I would like to see the word variance changed to an exception. Just because when we have the word variance, it does mean something completely different.
So moved. Sorry.
We've got a whole section of exemptions,
I
so it feels
What about
out
waiver?
of place.
Can we use waiver?
Like that.
Waiver.
What was the word?
Waiver.
Do we want to roll that into this motion as a friendly amendment?
So
Otherwise,
Michael-
we would need to take it separately.
So Michael's
propose-
shaking yes.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll propose that as the friendly.
So section
I drew a little volcano.
318 would now just have underneath the section here, it says a waiver may be requested, and then an additional line that speaks to the process of notifying the abutters. And then subsequently in section 324, it's number 9.
So it'll be changed in both,
Change in
both
both.
the new 318 and 324.
So then rule on waiver requests. Yes.
I think this sounds like a great solution, and I think I do want to defend the DRB as having a great level of skill in being able to negotiate all types of impacts and conflicts between land uses and structural things. And the Animal Control Committee, just like them, is similar to quasi judicial body. People have to be sworn in, testimonies recorded. The only difference is we don't get staff support. We have to write our own decisions. So.
True. Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, this is an amendment. And so all those in favor of the amended language, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, nay. Okay, thank you. Any other areas for discussion?
Make the motion to move on to second reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
And it's just discussion on that. Do we want to set a date? And Carol, can we actually set it for the 21st? Is that enough time, or do we have to give it
Yeah.
more time?
As soon as we can.
It would be a great Christmas present for Mr. LePage, I think, and the Animal and Fowl Task Force.
Getting him off of the task force will be the.
Okay, so we'll note that as part of the moving to the second reading, it will be warned for 7:15 on Tuesday, December 21st. Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed,
Aye.
nay. Thank you very much. And thank you to Mr. LePage for being here, and thank you for members of the Animal and Task Force for being present on Zoom. It was a lot of good work that you've done, and I think our health officer and other staff are providing the input needed to get it to this point.
I appreciate all comments, all the energy that's gone into this from all sides, and I'm honored to have been here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
So council, we're at item 9B, which is the FY21 audit presentation. Don, are you here? Yes, you are.
And Fred's there too. Would
I
you like?
am. And I am going to pass the torch on to our auditor, Fred, to give a recap.
Does anyone need screen sharing ability?
I can show the audit if,
Thank you, John.
thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Okay, Don. Everybody can hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. So if you have the audit in front of you, this is an audit of the city in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, as well as government auditing standards, which is a higher level. It's required by statute. It can only be done by auditors who meet certain education and other requirements. And it is a higher level of scrutiny than an audit of a for-profit financial statement. There's quite a bit more involved. The main item is that you will see in the back of the audit a report on compliance with laws and regulations and internal control. That does not that's not normal for a regular financial statement audit. Everything other than the two letters is yours. These are your financial statements prepared by your staff. What we get to do is give you an opinion on the statements that appears on page 2. And what it tells you is that you present and prepare your financial statements in full conformance with generally accepted accounting principles for governments, and they're very unique for governments. The only change this year is we are now have to include a schedule that shows the amount of education taxes that you take in and then turn over to the state and school district. That's new. That never showed up before. And so you'll see on page 24 that there's an additional $7+ million that you've always handled. It's just never showed up in your audit because it's not your money. You're doing as an agent for the state, collecting a state tax to be turned over to them. So that's a new standard because people were concerned to say that it wasn't showing the full impact of the amount of money we were really handling. As I've talked to you in the past, what I typically read is the management's discussion and analysis that starts on page 4 and goes for about 10 or 11 pages. It's a good summary of what happened during the year. It's written by management. What our responsibility is to make sure that all the information in there is accurate and conforms to the audited financials that follow, and they do. But it's narrative, talks about the budget process. It gives you some highlights of all the different funds. There's some charts and graphs, so it's readily readable, and you really get a good sense of what went on during the year. I'm not going to spend much time on the numbers. They're 6 months old, and I'm sure Don has kept you apprised of those. So there's nothing surprising in here. There were really no adjustments from what you were provided all along. And really what that means is you've got a good system of internal control, which means that you're getting good information on a real-time basis. As decision makers, it's really more important that you get good real-time information than an audit that comes out 3 to 6 months after the end of the year. There's really nothing you can do at that point. So having good procedures and controls is really what you want to make sure you have, so that as you go through the year and get budget status reports and financial information, that's what you get to use to make decisions on. Otherwise, it's too late by the time you get this. There's nothing you can do. I'm happy to talk about any of the numbers if you'd like. As I said, the second letter is in the back, and it is a report on compliance and internal control at the financial statement level. It starts on page 93. And what it tells you is that there was no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and no issues of non-compliance at a financial statement level. So that's a clean letter. That's not always been the case in the past. But this year, all of the issues that have been raised in any prior reports have been dealt with. And so it's nice to have that, to know that give you confidence that you do have good checks and balances, good controls, and a good accounting system in place to give you that real-time information. We did have a few other recommendations. I don't think there's anything new there. They're just things that they're being worked on. And nothing of real significance other than really just documenting the good system you have. So it's kind of the last step. You have good controls, good processes. We're saying, let's just get all of that documented. And then we just had a few other issues related to the way that you're processing delinquents, having a two-step process. We think that's redundant and probably not as efficient as it could be. We've talked about that in the past. And then we've asked the city to simply take a look at the administrative charges that are being charged to the water and sewer fund, just to make sure they still make sense. As time passes, things change, and we just want to have you take one last look at that. So that's it for recommendations. I don't know if there's any general or specific questions I can answer. There's a lot of information in there. I know it's close to a 100-page report, but if there's anything specific, and I know Dawn can answer any other questions as well, since she prepared these.
Council, any questions? Oh, Carol?
Not a question, but a comment. It is no small feat that we have a clean audit. You know, Fred said, Fred kind of passed over it like, yeah, it happens every day. It doesn't in Barre City. And it is a testament to Dawn in the finance department, not only to get us to this point, but to put the changes in place that got us here. And so I just want to make sure publicly that we acknowledge that.
I'd agree with that, Carol.
I third that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Carol took the words right out of my mouth. I remember my first year on council, the audit presentation was like an hour and a half going through the things that needed to just be fixed up or tightened up. And the fact that it's now good audit. You got any questions? Like that's awesome. And so a huge, I think tonight, this is a great example of the real world payoff of investing in a good professional city government staff that is passionate about what they do. So thank you, Dawn and Fred, and everyone who worked on this.
The other two points I want to make is Fred mentioned the delinquent taxes, and that is something we are working on. It's part of what will be addressed with the rearrangement of staff in City Hall. So it is on our radar, and hopefully will be done by the end of this fiscal year. And the other item with regards to the review of the administrative fees, charges to the enterprise funds, I know council and staff are reviewing that too. So we continue to move forward on all these issues.
And the other one of documenting our internal controls is, I'm going to say about 75% complete. So we should have this one knocked off as well next year.
Great.
So
Great.
making progress.
Great. One each year, and then we're done. That's wonderful. So, council, I do not see any other questions. This is just a presentation.
I would recommend a motion to accept.
I'll second it.
No, I can't make a motion.
You can make that motion.
I'll make it.
Second.
Nay.
Okay, so motion is made and seconded to accept the FY21 audit presentation. Any further discussion?
If only Carol had motioning powers. What a world.
I have it in my brain.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. So thank you very much. And thank you, Fred, again, for coming and presenting. I appreciate all the work that you've done to help us along, making sure those items are identified and allowing us to make improvements as necessary. And Don, it can't be said enough. I mean, thank you for all the work that you did to bring this to where it is today.
Thank you.
Fred's got a couple other
team effort.
topics. Yeah, Fred's got a couple other topics that we had been emailing back and forth. One of them having to do with the restrictions and allowances associated with the FY21 fund balance, and then also the creation of a reserve fund. But I'm not sure if an hour and a half into the meeting with more to go, whether this would be the opportune time or whether we would want to schedule another time to talk with Fred.
So Fred,
yep.
Do you have time?
I can. Yep. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. So second one first, I'll say, establishment of the fund in order to put a surplus in there, because as noted in our audit, we do have a $500,000 surplus, which council has been looking at possibly using for some one-time expenses, and some also going into that reserve fund.
So in general, if it's going to be for other than capital, so I do think it's important to have a reserve, first of all. I mean, if you look at your fund balance on page 17, you've gone from a deficit of a year ago of 38,000 to a surplus of about 486. So, and as you know, the factors that cause that, but it's, you know, important that you're there. It looks like a bit of money. It's 13 days of spending when you look at your 13 million plus budget. Your taxes don't start coming in until September 15th. That's the first due date for taxes. That's about 77 days. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you need 77 days of cash, but you certainly, in my opinion, need more than 13. I mean, 2 weeks, you go through, you know, that every other week you go through that amount of money. And so it's important that you first evaluate what you think you need for a general fund balance to carry you forward. And there's lots of reasons why you want one. I mean, the main one is cash flow, frankly. And so you've got cash flow because there's money in the other funds, and the due funds allow you to do that. So you may be spending water fund until the tax money comes in, or you may be spending capital money till the taxes come in. But if there ever a point in time when you did all your capital projects and your grants were spent, you may not have that position. The second reason, and maybe more importantly, is to manage your tax rate. So without a surplus, you really don't have any choice. There's no wiggle room. The only change you can make is to reduce services. But with a reasonable fund balance, then if there are years where unanticipated expenses, or we're looking at an inflation. I mean, I hope, you know, some of the predictions related to fuel, and we're certainly seeing things go up, and may impact the budget that you're in, and certainly could impact future budgets. So if you're sitting here in budget time a year from now and there's no fund balance, then it makes the decisions harder. If you have something, you can weather those rainy days. If that becomes adequate, then you want to put money into a separate fund. And the term that gets used, the colloquial term, is a rainy day fund. Under our standards, it's very strict in terms of what can go in there. If you look at the top of page 50, we actually give you that definition. It has to be for a specified purpose, and only in circumstances or conditions that signal the need for that are identified in detail and are not expected to occur routinely. So there has to be certain triggers for that money to come back out of that fund. So it's not just a slush fund, it's for real emergencies. Otherwise, what you're really looking at is building up a reasonable fund balance in the general fund itself. And whether you keep it in the general fund or keep it in a separate fund, I don't know that it's really that relevant. I mean, the separate fund would allow you to put those strings to it. Whether that would require a charter change or not, I don't know. That's a legal question. I don't know of any community in Vermont that has that kind of fund. Most of them are still trying to build up their normal fund balance just to get through the cash flow and the budget stabilization issues. So, but it's certainly out there and it could happen. Capital reserves are a different issue. I mean, that really depends on the city's philosophy in terms of, you know, right now, if you're putting money away to replace items, the question always is who should pay for those? Should the current users pay for future capital? And the argument is, well, they're using them up. So yeah, maybe they need to put some aside. The other argument is, but we're not using that. Why should we pay for something that the new sewer system, the new water system, the new grader, whatever? And the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. And so I know that it's probably on everyone's list to come up with a good capital plan where you look at all of your items, all your major capital items, and determine when they need to be replaced, what it's going to cost to be replaced, how much, and how are you going to pay for them? And that how to pay for them is probably a combination of reserves, debt, and perhaps grants. But those are really the only places that typically capital assets can be paid for. And so it's really part of a bigger project to come up with that capital plan first, and then try to discuss the funding. And then the funding then leads to what do we need for reserves to get there. So it's a big project. And I know it's on the wish list, but that really will give you the answer you need to know. it's still something that every council is going to wrestle with in terms of that philosophy of what are we going to do? And what I see is probably a mix of things. You know, we're going to do some reserves. We know we're going to have to get in debt, and we hope there's grants. So I don't know if that helps, or I mean, there's a lot to it, but I do think you do need. I definitely think you need a general fund balance. And as I said, you know, when you look at $500,000, it seems like a lot. But when you think of it as 13 days of spending, I don't think any of us would want to have only 13 days of money in the bank. That's not a lot.
Well, that's good perspective, especially when you note the 77 days of time where we don't have tax revenue. So it's only 1/6 of that time.
Correct.
So, you know, over time, if that fund can be built up even further, I think we only have the ability for 5%.
Yeah.
And so as noted, so there could be this rainy day fund, for example. We also do have our capital fund.
Well, the rainy day fund is different from a reserve fund. Just want to make sure that from a general fund reserve fund. So.
And then I think you also noted our capital improvements. That would be another location that it could go. And then consequently, we could actually just buy down our debt. So if we do have items that were near expiration, if there was a bond, for example, that's near the end, we could remove those, which would also have a positive impact on the general fund budget overall.
Yeah, although some of the bonds that you've issued will not allow you to repay them because they've made promises to the bondholders to pay them over the periods, and so even when they call them, they typically don't allow you to repay them. If you have debt at banks, that's a different issue, but that's something you can look at some point in time.
So council, any questions on those as options?
No, but that was really helpful, just getting an overview of everything we could potentially use it for. And I do agree that we'll probably end up with a mixed bag of things to do.
We already started, so.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So just talking about the fiscal year fund balance, which is $516,000. As you know, and I'm not sure if Fred knows specifically, but I put forth a recommendation to at least, or suggestion, let me just say suggestion, to use a couple $200,000 for a reserve fund. The possibility of using $100,000 to put towards next year's tax rate. If that's not chosen, that could go to the, well, it could go to wherever the council wants to put it, but it could also go to increasing the reserve fund. And then I had recommendations for other current expenses, unplanned, unbudgeted expenses, which we have staring us in the face, if you will. And I guess I'd like to ask Fred his opinion about using some of that fund balance for current expenses that are unbudgeted, unplanned, but nonetheless they have developed. And I think probably of the 568,000, I don't have the list in front of me, but I believe I had a suggestion for around a couple $100,000 worth of current expense allocations. So I would ask Fred. His thoughts.
So Steve, I mean, obviously, you know, as I said, you know, if there's needs and the services would be compromised if those things aren't done, then that's a decision that, you know, you're going to make a recommendation. The council's going to, you know, either approve or not approve that in terms of doing that. The one thing I guess I do want to point out is that number that we're looking at is a point in time. You know, it's what existed as of midnight, June 30th. It's changed by then. You've got 6 more months almost, you know. And so when I always caution that, you know, don't only look at just that, also look to see where you are now and where you think you're going to be next June. And I know it's hard, but, you know, because if you're spending a fund balance that existed here, if you know that you're having a pretty good year and it's going to stay there, then it's real. But if you know that you're already overspending line items, and I know that we're seeing consistently across and we do a lot of municipalities that staffing is the biggest issue why they're having budget surpluses, is because they simply can't fill positions, and even the overtime is eating it up. And I don't know if that's still happening in Barre, but it's certainly happening all over. So
It is, it's happening.
yeah, yeah. So that's consistent with everywhere we're seeing. And so, I mean, without specifics, I guess it really depends on, those, what the needs are. I mean, if these are things that were deferred items waiting to have a surplus to spend, and they would impact services that are important, then, sure. But obviously I'm still of the mind that I think that, that 13 days isn't enough and it probably needs to be built up, but that can be done over time. I mean, you're at the point now where we're actually having the discussion about what to do with a surplus. I mean, that's not, that's a good place to be. It's not where you've been. We've had many discussions over the years about how to eliminate deficits. So the fact that you're here is nice. And it becomes a philosophical discussion in terms of how much money should we keep, but it's not philosophical when it comes to, do we have enough for cash flow? And I know Carol looks at that and Don looks at that to evaluate that. And the good thing about municipalities is that while you have separate funds, you pool your cash. And so you do have money in other funds to use for cash flow, but you need to make sure that it's enough for everywhere. Otherwise, you'll be incurring debt costs for borrowing, and rates have been low, but we know they're going to go up. And so, and I've seen them up where the, high rates, and it's not advantageous for the municipality to borrow. It is right now. So, I mean, there's a lot to it, Steve, I guess. And I don't, without knowing the specifics of the needs, I think it's a reasonable request.
Yeah, I guess, Fred, that's my point, that to the extent you've given the advice you have, you're not ruling out the possibility of using some of that surplus for current expenses.
No, or tax reduction. I mean, there's everyone has their own. Yeah, everybody has their own appetite for what they can handle in terms of tax increases. And as I said earlier, having a fund balance allows you to mitigate some of those increases. So, but I wouldn't want you to use it all up, because that eliminates that ability in future years. And so that's that trade-off.
And that's not where I would go.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it does. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Fred. This is Councilor Hemrick. I had a question about the rainy day fund, and could that be used to support a cash flow shortage? And then would it need to be repaid back when the tax receipts come in or revenues come in?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't move the money particularly, so it would still be part of the pooled cash. It would just be a part of a fund balance that has strings to it. So, cash and fund balance are two different things, and so it would be tracked separately. But yes, the cash would still be available to help that cash flow. And in fact, in doing a cash flow calculation, it would probably be taken into consideration, particularly if it's just timing. I mean, if all we're talking about is that 77 days, then yes, that money would typically be available to help with the cash flow.
Thank you.
So any other questions? And did you have anything for the first question?
I didn't. I just wanted to, if there was anything specific, Fred, that you wanted to talk about with regards to what the heck was my first one?
Yeah.
It was the fund balance. Well, they were tied together, right?
Yeah, they were tied together.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think we covered them. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Fred.
All right.
I mean, that's really timely, because we do have some discussions that are coming up about how we're going to utilize that fund. And, it's a different pot of money than the ARPA fund. So how that can be used is completely different on how ARPA can be used. So it's good to know both are available for different purposes.
That's correct. Yes. Yep. And I know you've got ARPA coming up on the discussion later tonight. So, yeah. And we're hearing that everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
All right. Good. Good night.
Good night. Council, we did move up item 9F for the next item. This is the discussion and or action on ARPA program community request process. Steve, I'll turn this over to you, and Council, I believe we all had a presentation in front of us.
Yeah, if you could share the screen, Teddy or Mayor, I'll walk through this PowerPoint.
Okay, so this was the item that was sent to us this morning.
Yes. Can you see that?
Not yet.
No, I've got to actually go into my email to grab it.
Well, I've got it here. I can share this, if you can share the screen.
Oh, I'm already there.
Okay. Could you go? Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, counselors, as we've discussed, I wanted to have what I'm calling a coordination briefing this evening. If you go to the next slide, Mayor. It's really just, I'll say, start or continue the discussion for the council deciding what it wants to use for a process for identifying, selecting, and approving ARPA-funded projects within the monies that we have. Just by way of background, we have $2,500,000 and change. It needs to be obligated by, the funds need to be obligated by December 31st, 2024, just a little over 2 years, and expended by December 31st, 2026. And obligated means not just a number on a list. It means that the funds, the committed funds, have to be under some kind of contract. It's more than just being on a list. Next slide. So I know some of this you've seen before. I just want to run it by you again and refresh your memories. The four basic categories are the pandemic response to help. I mean, you can read that as well as I can. Workforce personnel, lost revenue. Dawn has done the analysis and we don't qualify for lost revenue. That's not necessary in my mind. I don't think that's particularly significant because it only would free up money to maybe use for general fund purposes as opposed to keeping them in the ARPA pool. And then the last one is water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure improvements. And we know we got plenty of water and sewer. Next slide. So what I was trying to do this evening is begin to get the council focused on what it wants to do for a process for either soliciting proposals, identifying projects, or whatever. And the question is, do you want to go through a formal notification process? I mean, put an ad in the paper and other social media sites and solicit proposals. You know, we have some that are trickling in either from external organizations or from counselor suggestions or whatever. So I'm looking to get some guidance from the council as to how you'd like to do that. Some thoughts I've had is you know, we could put specific notices in the paper, have a response period of I'd say probably 60 days, maybe 90 days, and see what comes in. There's nothing that says you couldn't do that again a year from now, but it's really up to the council how they'd like to proceed. Whether proposals come in as a response to a public notice or whether they just come in on their own as they have been coming in, I'd recommend that there be a process for that. So there's some consistency in looking at different proposals across the board. If the council concurs, I'd suggest that development of a simple application form that external applicants, and I mean external applicants as opposed to proposals coming from staff for infrastructure type improvements or things like that, submit a letter of interest. The applications would be a letter of interest and also an application. The application would be submitted to the staff for review and screening. And then the manager would submit those proposal requests to the council for review and funding decision. The ultimate authority on any kind of ARPA spending is the council's and only the council's. So no spending authorizations would be made in any other manner. My thoughts about an application form are really just some basic information. It's not intended to be heavy duty, but some of the basic information that we would need: letter of interest, the organization name, contact info, their proposal name, the proposal budget, how much the organization is able to put towards the project that they're proposing, how much they're asking the city to allocate out of the ARPA funding request. They would need to identify or work with us to identify the applicable expenditure category, and then include their full proposal document as an attachment, if you will, to support the application.
So Steve, before moving off from this one, just for consideration, if this was to be an application process, any information that would talk about the benefit to the city? So whether that's a financial benefit or if it's.
I mean, if you have suggestions to add to this, I'm fine with that. I was just trying to put forth some basic thoughts. We can expand it without trying to get too terribly bureaucratic and complicated, but city benefits could certainly be an item to have them at least speak to. And I'd welcome other suggestions by email or whatever, if the council concurs with that approach. A while back, I determined that as requests were starting to trickle in, it would be necessary to have some kind of funding request log. Working with the staff, I've prepared this. It's not fancy, it's not complicated, it's basic, but I think it's simple and it gets the job done. I've got really two categories here that you can see, those that have been approved, and right now only one has been approved, and that's the Aldrich Library Warming Shelter proposal for $17,000. The council approved that on the 16th of November, and it falls within the ARPA criteria number 1. And then what I call the queue, and that's pending council approval. And you may or may not have either acted or seen all of these, but I know a while back, Councilor Stockwell had suggested or recommending an allocation for a revolving housing fund of $200,000. I know that number is not cast in concrete and probably subject to change as the housing task force moves ahead, but I wanted to have that here as a placeholder because it was a suggestion put forth by Councilor Stockwell. You know that Michelle Kersey from Downstreet came in last week with a request for $60,000 for the transitional housing on Keith Avenue. Council understandably said wasn't prepared to make a decision then, also gave her some requests, if you will, for additional information. I'll come back to this particular project at the end here, but and then I've long thought that infrastructure projects are going to be a significant use of this ARPA funding. What I've done at this point is to populate this with the water and sewer infrastructure plans that Bill Ahern developed last week or prior to the budget hearing. I just plugged those in here. I would say they're placeholders at the moment. Doesn't mean that we don't have other infrastructure that we can add here. My general thinking as manager that maybe half of the ARPA funds would be used for infrastructure and the other half at the council's discretion for other projects or proposals. But again, that's entirely up to the council's decision. And then I think the next slide, just to pop down. Yeah. So I have the 5 pages of expenditure categories. This again is only as a reminder and an easy reference point there, I think, are some 61 or so expenditure categories. Whatever proposals are put forward have to fit into one of these categories, if you will. So this will be the check sheet, if you will, that we'll be looking to, and Don will be looking to assess the applicable criteria and also the eligibility of proposals put forward. So that's really the essence of the presentation, is to begin to get the council to focus on how it would like to proceed in this process as we continue down the road. And so I'd open it up to any questions or suggestions or recommendations that you have.
So Steve, just one comment on your request log. I believe there are additional requests that just aren't on that log.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. There are internal staff requests, and we've talked about them, but we haven't quite vetted them. And so I wasn't ready to put them up in the pending queue.
Councilor Wazizak?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Steve, for putting this together. I know some of it was review for council, but I think it was also super helpful for members of the public that are tuning in to get that overview too. I would tend to agree with the city manager's or not official recommendation, but off the cuff comment he made a couple minutes ago about reserving a significant amount of this money for long-term infrastructure projects. In my view, the long-term capital needs of the city are our biggest financial liability and one of our biggest budgetary issues, among other budgetary issues. But so I think that one idea that I had was for the city manager, DPW, the staff, to put together a proposal for a certain amount of infrastructure projects, whether we allocate that to be 50% of the 2.5 for 65%, whatever. Put that money aside, make that investment that I think is very much needed in our long-term infrastructure projects. Reserve a certain amount of money, let's just say 50%, 35%, what have you, and have that be our pot of money for what I will call outside ideas, whether it be a committee or an organization or a resident or a business owner that bring it forward. But I really think that this, if we approach this as we could do anything, I'm afraid it may not be as effectively spent. Whereas with the opportunity we have with the surplus to make an indent in our capital reserves, as well as this opportunity to address some of our long-term infrastructure projects, I think that could go a long way towards addressing the overall financial stability of the city.
I'd add another category in there for housing, straight up housing requests too. But again, it could be all of what we discuss and boil down as a council. Councilor Stockwell?
I don't really want us to decide upon ARPA funds without deciding upon what we as a council agree upon as priorities. That needs to drive what we're looking for in terms of proposals or what we want to fund. So that just seems, I feel like we really need to have that discussion, even if there's no facilitator, just some discussion about when we look at Barre City, and we want to invest money in Barre City, what do we want to see happen? What are areas that are traditionally neglected? How can we make changes that would maybe have long-reaching effects? That's really my concern. I don't want us to just say, oh, let's give a chunk here and let's give a chunk here without having a broader vision. That's all. Thanks.
I would agree with Councilor Stockwell on that. In fact, I had meant to speak to priorities, but absolutely, to the extent that I have a list here, it merely reflects what has come upon the radar screen at this point. And I'm also trying to make the point that I think there should be a significant allocation to infrastructure. But I agree that as the council considers applications that come in, and I think the mayor spoke to that in terms of what are the benefits to the city. But maybe the council wants to devote part of another meeting to discussing ARPA priorities or whatever. But I agree with that.
Councillor Booton?
I think what would be nice to see is a very detailed list of everything that the city needs for infrastructure that could be covered under the ARPA funds. And with that, then we can make a determination as to whether or not we're going to be able to solicit, organizations or have them apply for it. I think the recommendation for the application process as presented, I think that's not bad. I think that's actually a pretty good setup, and I would recommend going forward with that. With the, request that we would know, any impact, would that have an impact on our grand list? I'm not, those kind of things, the kind of impacts that would make a difference. I think having that in your application process would be great. But I'm okay with staff doing that. And I definitely would like to see a detailed list of, not a wish list, but a needs list that we have for infrastructure and, things in Barre.
Councillor Sean Bell?
I agree totally with Councillor Stockwell's suggestion about we setting priorities, and also with Steve's suggestion that maybe we put some time aside that's bona fide time to really discuss it. I don't think this is the kind of conversation you can have lightly. I don't want to see this money go because we've got it and have it become kind of a money grab for various groups. I'd love us to put some well-considered thought into it.
Councillor Hemrick?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with holding off on any application form right now. And in that sense, because I am concerned that this would just set the expectation that all the funding would be going to third parties, or that we would be disappointing a lot of third parties once we really have a sense of what the city needs are. And I suspect a lot of this money could go to city needs, and there really wouldn't be much funding available to do third-party support. And so in terms of a process, I'd really like us to think about those priorities. And for me, and what I hear people talk about as being a concern in Ward 1 is the condition and investment and reinvestment in housing and confronting the population and household loss in the city. I hear about people with concerns about infrastructure. And I know I'm concerned about the staff capacity to do the project management necessary to implement any project, whether it be a stormwater project. It all takes project management. And I think there's that capacity conversation that overlaps with this budget conversation we're going to have. I suspect that, when we start to dig into the infrastructure needs, and Bill and Steve are already working on that, we're going to see that our needs far exceed this amount of money. Our municipal plan says the average lifespan of asphalt, just as an example, is 10 to 15 years, and we need to be paving 3 to 5 miles every year just to keep up. Well, what's proposed over the next 4 years is 0.98 miles per year, 20 to 33% of what we need to be doing just to break even and keep our system even keel. And I know Bill has mentioned a number of $40 million behind in infrastructure capital investment. Well, at the rate we're spending $400,000 a year, that could take us 100 years. And that, I mean, all things being equal, which of course they aren't, those aren't numbers of sustainability. And this is an opportunity to think about what are the lowest cost, highest impact projects that can make a big difference and make investments in the grand list. And that's one of the reasons I'm really interested in housing investments, because it's a direct investment in the city's future and the city's financial sustainability. So infrastructure, housing, and staff capacity if we're starting to talk about priorities, those are some that I would really put at the top of the list. And I think whenever you're talking about housing investments, you're talking about an investment in the grand list.
So the only other thing I want to add into this conversation is we haven't talked about if we are going to be doing anything with the local options tax to see if there's going to be revenue generated through that program. As we're talking about staffing needs, we're already it's at 3.4%. We talked about maybe using 50,000 for the first year to bring it down under 3%. But with that, having even an increase in the same year where you're asking for another tax to increase revenue, that's going to be something that's a hard sell for everybody. So as we're looking at all of those different options, we do need to start taking those together. I think, starting with our budget workshop on Saturday, just realizing that, if there is some of the ARPA funds that can be used for staffing that will have some of that budgetary impact, that's something we should look at, especially if a majority of council wants to look at a local options tax too.
Mr. Mayor, I would make one comment to the extent that Councilor Hemrick was understandably talking about staff capacity. Key to advancing a lot of these infrastructure projects will be the budgeting for and the hopefully filling the position of the deputy director or assistant director of public works. That individual could be, assuming that individual is qualified, and I would expect that we wouldn't hire somebody who's not qualified, could take on a primary role of DPW infrastructure projects management. We have the roadmap in place to bring on some of that staff capacity, but not as an interim thing. I mean, that bill has spoken to the need to get that position filled for succession planning. And I think it's quite clear that we have enough, more than enough work in the Public Works Department to keep two senior managers busy getting everything done that we need to get done.
So I just want to pull some of this together. So it sounds like the council would like to see a list of infrastructure projects that are eligible for ARPA to have as part of the discussion. We will have more discussion from the budget conversation to see if there's some overlap there that's needed. Are there any other asks for the review before we decide if there should be an application process or not? Well, because one of the recommendations here was that there'd be an outside application process, and before establishing that or even noting that there would be one, it was talked about having that review for infrastructure. So I just wanted to make sure that we have all the materials that we can have at such a meeting, and just making sure that we have that requested.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to clarify, I wasn't necessarily recommending that you have an outside process. It's just, I was raising that question and trying to prompt the council to think about it, not to answer that question tonight, but that's something I think the council needs to consider, and reflecting on Councilor Hemrick's concern, if the council thought the priorities were such and the need was such that we use most, if not all of that for infrastructure, then that would negate the need to have an external solicitation process. So just one of those things that I thought the council should think about in due course and ultimately decide how it wants to proceed.
Councilor Booten?
Yeah, definitely. I want to see the list that the city staff can prepare for the needs of the city. If we do go outside, of the city having the funds, I would be comfortable with the recommendation, but I want to see what you guys have for needs that need to be filled with the ARPA funds, because I, like you, think that we could probably use them all on, the needs of the city.
Councilor Wazizak?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts about a couple things that have come up. I've been thinking about this since the last budget session. We can talk more about this on Saturday. I'm not in favor of using really any of this ARPA money for any permanent staff position. I think Steve raised some very good concerns, but actually tracking and reporting and getting that the okay from the Treasury that I just don't think it's worth it. I am in favor of a local options tax. We should put it on the ballot. You should vote for it. It's minimum pain on the wallet, really good investment in the city and our infrastructure. However, I don't think we should be thinking about, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, about politically selling it to the voters to get it passed. I understand that. But when looking at actual dollar amounts, we have $2.549.241 million. And I think that we have to look at this as if we have that amount of money. I think it would be unwise for us to try to a little bit of ARPA for this position and then do this over here. I think we need to look at this, or what if we get a local options tax? How much will that bring in? I think we need to look at this as 2.5 million. As has already been identified by council, I'm very strongly in favor of infrastructure being our #1 priority with this money. However, I do also think we should have some amount of money. I don't know right now, and I'm not ready to say whether it should be 50, 250, $500,000. But I think we do need to hear from, I would be even comfortable limiting it to residents, organizations, and business owners that operate within the city of Barre. But this money is the money of the entire city of Barre. And this is not meant to be a slight towards any council member or staff member or members of our committees, but we don't always have the best ideas. We don't always have everything on our radar. And I think the city would be very well served by putting out a call to local residents, business owners, and organizations of what some of their ideas are for how to, one idea that came from a business owner down in Manchester, New Hampshire, were beautification grants. There were $5,000 to $10,000 grants given to downtown businesses to increase the accessibility and aesthetics of their entryways right onto Main Street. And that was a way of rejuvenating the downtown. That was a recommendation that came from the mayor, but through a public process and public hearings that Mayor Joyce Craig had down in Manchester, where a business owner brought up, hey, Mayor, why don't we do this? Great idea. And of course, they have, I think, $30 million, $60 million. They have a lot more than we do. But I think that leaving space for residents, business owners, and local organizations to come to us with their ideas could prove to be incredibly valuable. And then I will shut up.
No, it's a valid point. Some of our best projects that have happened in the city have come from others outside of this council. Sure.
As a resident of the city of Barre, Councilor Wozniak stole most of my thunder. I believe that this is Barre City money. It's not Barre City government money. I believe that it has been given to the community and that involving the community is a big part of it. I think you can set aside a chunk for municipal use, for infrastructure, et cetera, but I think it's important to reach out. I think that there are financial benefits to reaching out too, because other organizations can bring in matching funds and enhance the value of the 2.5 million to grow it. The other thing is that they can bring in their own administrative support, which can help with the costs associated with administration and project management.
So Joellen, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, good evening. Hi, everybody. Please don't forget when we're thinking about these expenditures, those groups that the city has developed over the past couple of years. The different committees have needs for funding as well and could certainly qualify, many of them, for this type of money. So before we hold it out to nonprofits or businesses or whatever, not that you shouldn't get their ideas, but make sure that the various committees that we've put together here in the city are funded for whatever their needs may be, so that they can do the work that they're charged with.
Councilor Trumbull?
Hearing all these suggestions brings me back to my original comment that we need to develop some sort of a discussion system as to how, I mean, some sort of a discussion. Take the time to figure out how we're going to figure this out. Because there are clearly many ideas that could be beneficial to using the money for the city. However, we need to have the priorities and the clarity going forward. And I mean, clearly, this could go on for an hour or two tonight, and we're not going to be there. I think it's a process that we need to get to work on. And it could also help us frame many of the things that we've been thinking about, worrying about vis-a-vis what's before the city anyway. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just a thought about that. If it would seem to me you'd want to block out maybe an hour discussion, it could even go longer. There's a couple of ways to deal with that. I would suggest there's not enough time left in the calendar year to put that discussion on an agenda. If you wanted to do it in the context of a council meeting with a limited agenda, allowing for much of the evening to be devoted to this discussion, that we might schedule something for the second meeting in January. The other option, which may not excite everybody, is to have a workshop dedicated to this, whether it's a Saturday workshop or an evening workshop where your focus is just on ARPA priorities, and you don't have to worry about doing the business of the city at the same time. So just a couple suggestions.
Thank you, Mayor. And just in terms of talking about process, it seems like there's been a lot of already very good ideas mentioned here tonight. This feels like a public participatory planning process. I've heard Teddy mention a hearing, having a public hearing. I love the idea of some type of survey, really accessible to anybody who lives in the city, to talk about some of their ideas to spend money. Maybe even like the most innovative youth idea contest, bring in something, and we could all pitch in $20 for an award for youth submissions on some things. So it might be time to get creative and think about how do we break out of the ad in the paper and even just out of the hearing room to collect a lot of ideas and then bring those back to a workshop with the department head suggestions on some of the things that they would identify as needs as well.
Yeah, I think by putting it out there that says there's an application process makes it sound like we have we've already made decisions. Whereas I think if we have more of, like you're saying, a public hearing, people can come with their ideas, and it doesn't have to be something as structured as an application. And at that point, if there are ideas that make sense, then that might come to, well, we think that should come through as an application from an outside organization comparatively to something that is internal to the city. So with that noted, Steve, we did ask that the Down Street folks, they were going to come back on the 21st. I think in discussions with them, they would actually come back on the 4th. But that was something that we'd mentioned to them at the last meeting. Would it make sense, instead of waiting till the second meeting in January, that we actually had something on the first meeting in January so that we can start that process? Because that's one of the applications or ideas that we already know is going to be coming before council.
Is that a question to me, Mayor?
Well, that is a question to you, just because staff time to pull items together for right after the new year. And
yeah, there was a method to my madness when I said the second meeting in January, just trying to provide enough breathing room between now and then, and also to get a handle on what would be required for that meeting. I suggested that in the context of the council blocking out some time, not necessarily a hearing, but blocking out some time to discuss this. My suggestion is that you have your discussion or your workshop, whatever you want to call it, before soliciting anybody for anything. Collect your thoughts first, and then we can, as part of that, decide what will be the process for soliciting ideas and input. I strongly encourage you to have a focused discussion first before we do a shotgun approach here. And, out of that, you can decide to schedule a hearing and so on and so forth. That's my recommendation.
And I just want to make sure, because we all have some different ideas and we're going to have to try to come together. And part of that is as a council. So what that process looks like, what things should be used for. So I would suggest that every counselor bring forward some kind of outline. I think like Councilor Wozniak, you had provided something that said stack of recommendations, outside requests, things like that, as an example.
Yeah, I like the idea of a workshop folk. I mean, we're in budget season. We used to do budget workshops every Saturday for months anyway, so throw another one on there. But I like the idea of a workshop to work through like the mayor just said, I pretty much laid out what I would like to see. But I also agree with Steve that we should not do any sort of public, because even if we say we're not discussing specific projects, we're discussing priorities. If we warn a public hearing for ARPA priorities, people are going to come in with their ideas for specific projects. Like that's just what's going to happen. And I think that we don't want to set those false expectations. So I like the idea of having a set workshop.
Yeah, the other thing I just want to point out is not everybody out there knows that you can't use this for filling potholes.
Right.
So it's going to be more of not just a solicitation, but an education process when we go through this.
Well, my suggestion is you can have that workshop, set your priorities, and then if there's a desire to solicit projects or proposals, you can say, we're soliciting projects within these categories or these priorities or whatever. And then ultimately you're going to have to meet the ARPA eligibility criteria. But again, that planning session, I think, will be very instrumental and helpful in you moving ahead with the process. I'd even suggest, at the risk of being the skunk at the party, a couple of hour workshop on a Saturday in January, the middle of January, where everybody's fresh. You're not trying to squeeze it into a council meeting. It doesn't have to go on forever, and allows you to focus on that, on the issue at hand. But that's a suggestion, and certainly the council can decide how it wants to proceed.
Councilor Booton and Councilor Shambo.
Yeah, so I just want to say I think it's premature to have the Down Street come for that $60,000 in ARPA funds. We're not there yet. That's my opinion. I'm not there. I don't know about the rest of the council.
Yeah, that's said, and I'm not lobbying for Down Street. It's just they're under a particular time crunch, and that again, the council may say, well, that's not our problem, but they're trying to secure their financing and be able to sign a construction contract around the 10th to the 12th or so of January. So they have a critical timing need. Now, I can understand the council can say their timing need is not our timing need, but I just wanted you to be aware of that as you decide how you want to proceed.
I was going to say, I agree with Michael about Down Street. I think it's premature, especially if we decide that we are going to take some time to set some priorities before we start soliciting suggestions, because I think it just opens a bag full of worms and it opens precedent. I like the idea of finding some time. I've already got at least 2 Saturdays booked in January for work. So if we're gonna do a Saturday, it's gonna have to happen fast. I can see taking the time in an evening or just devoting most of council meeting, as Steve said, on the 11th. You know,
Well, and I can try to, I hate the word split the baby. We have typically met only 3 of the 4 meetings on Tuesdays. So in January, if we wanted to take that 4th meeting and we can decide the other 3 based on our schedules to have regular business and we use another Tuesday that's specifically for this purpose. We've all blocked it out already. And that would be a way to try to make sure that it doesn't interfere with other weekend items, but I know a lot of us also serve on other groups. So it would be tough to try to find time to schedule all those things.
I like that approach, and all I want for Christmas are no dog bite hearings. No dog bite hearings.
So what I'm taking away from this, we're going to schedule a meeting in January to have council come together and go over this. That will be the only agenda item. It will treat it kind of like what we did for the budget session so that we can focus on it and have an outcome. We'll schedule the other 3 meetings and I'll work with Steve on which Tuesday that this would work best for, depending on staff availability to have something pulled together. And it sounds like that with Down Street, we would want to reach back out to them and say, we're not ready yet, and we'll invite them back after the process is in place.
Do you want me to contact them tomorrow, Mr. Mayor, or would you like to?
If you want to reach out to Connie.
Yep. I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay. So for that session, just to reiterate, make sure to bring forward what you have for ideas or plans on how this should proceed, and we can discuss those and try to make sure that we have something for an output at the end of that session. Councilor Wazizak.
Yeah, if I could just request, you can send it to the rest of council too, but I would still like to see that list before that workshop. Sorry, that was not clear at all. The list of ARPA eligible infrastructure projects. I would like to have that knowledge walking into the workshop, if at all possible.
I think we can have that by the beginning of January, January 3rd, January 4th.
Great.
Yeah, I think that would be really good to have. Thank you.
So then therefore, I would just request that we don't have that Tuesday be the 4th.
Right, it would
that we
be
can
at
have
least the
one after. So if we get it on Monday, the 3rd, we at least have a week to look over that before that meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we can state that. Steve, you're looking for the second Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with the 11th.
Okay. So we'll move forward thinking that is going to be the date where we're doing this. Okay, council, we do have 3 more items. We do have, and I'm going to try to see if council's fine with me taking up 9D first, because Joe Ellen's been here for the entire meeting.
Thank you, Joe Allen.
So 9D is the discussion regarding a community needs assessment. And welcome, Joe Ellen.
Hi, thank you very much. Well, let me give you a little bit of background first. The Diversity and Equity Committee, when they first began, had the daunting task of trying to figure out how to actually assess what equity is and what it isn't, what barriers may exist in the city. And we came across what Vermont developed out of its Diversity and Equity Office, called the Vermont Equity Assessment Tool for Policy and Budgets, which, as you know, we adapted for the city and had approved by the council. So that became a tool that allowed us to, examine the concept of equity on projects. And we began working with first the police department, because they were redoing some of their policies. So
For the past year, we've been doing this. Now we have a team of 3 of our members who have been going to the various different groups that we think could use this training and training them in how to use the tool. And in doing so, we've recognized what some of the, shall we say, shortcomings are. One of which is it requires looking at the city, not just in kind of terms of what is observed or what is anecdotal, but diving deep into the data that already exists. And once we began to do that, because that's what this form asks us to do when we're using it, we recognized that there were many data points that were missing. And also that there's a possibility for us while we're doing projects to collect data and be able to use that in the future. Knowing that the specific things that we were missing, we had thought, well, maybe we can do a community needs assessment based on what we were looking at. And I had worked with the University of Vermont Center on Rural Studies before on community needs assessments, and they're a well-known and well-respected academic institution that that does these things. So I contacted Michael Mosher. Michael is the coordinator of the Vermont State Data Center. He's a research specialist. And he seemed very interested in helping the city out with this. So he wanted to meet right away, and I wanted to get back with my committee first to map out how we could do this. And so then I began going to some of the all in for Barre meetings. And one in particular, the one on housing, at the end, what was mentioned that was needed is a community needs assessment looking at examining housing issues. So I was at their meeting last night and talked to them about the possibility of combining our efforts and having UVM do a needs assessment based on a coalition of groups that may also need to look for data. So I'm coming to the council in order to just apprise you of this, and also to say that it could also include various city departments that might also use information. And let me explain what a needs assessment can do for us. An academic needs assessment of this type is the kind of information that people use or organizations use, the city could use to acquire grants. Grants ask you point blank what your needs are, and you need to prove it to them. You can't say just, oh, I need a lawnmower. You have to prove why you need the lawnmower and the data that backs it up. So a needs assessment, a comprehensive needs assessment of this type could potentially bring a lot of either matching money into the city for what the city's already doing, or bring money in without matching funds. Actually, there's all kinds of grants that could be acquired. I know that our committee hasn't got a line item in the budget. I'm assuming there are many others that don't as well. So were we to look for grant money to do our work, this would certainly help us in that regard. So it does two things, this type of survey. It collects the information that already exists from the variety of different groups and organizations that collect it. And it also can actually do scientific surveys to collect data that we might need that isn't out there. So I would like to have a representative from council who would meet with Michael and myself, and hopefully some members of some of the other coalition that we can draw in. I haven't talked to more than just the housing group, but I know that two of the other groups also talked about having a needs assessment done.
So Is the ask tonight just for a council member to be appointed for this purpose, or is there more of an ask that you're looking for tonight?
Right now, I think it's wise just to have an initial meeting with Michael to see what kind of parameters UVM has or what kind of criteria they need. He seemed very interested in working with the city. I don't think at this point they have too many projects of this type. So I'm just asking for a person who I can contact to say, hey, let's meet with Michael. I would not anticipate this happening until after the holiday, until after January 1st.
So I'm just looking around the room. Councillor Shambell looks like she might be interested.
I might be interested, yeah.
I just have some questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I'm sorry, I just have some questions such as like, I know already out there working with like the homeless and the people with disabilities and other people that are out there, it's really hard to get a gauge on who is out there and what kind of folks that are out there. Like right now there's in the winter, they do the point in time survey. We don't have a great guess about how many folks are out there that are homeless.
Right.
We don't have a great, scientific tool to say how many folks in Barre have a disability. So I'm just wondering how this works. Does how you reach people with this assessment? Is it over a computer? Do you go out to like actually seek people out? I'm just curious.
Well, there are a variety of different techniques, and this is exactly why an institution such as UVM would be engaged to help us figure out how it is that we do that. There are ways to do, obviously, there are people who don't have access to computers, so a computer survey is only one way, but there could be door to door, literally knocking on doors. This is not my work personally. I have used surveys and I've been part of coordinating surveys, but I'm not the person really to ask about this. It's Michael who needs to hear these questions and give them give the answers. So thus the meeting with him first, just to talk about things like this, like how do we collect it? And how do we capture some of the information that already exists, which we know may not be accurate, totally accurate, but like the various councils are collecting. The Council on the Aging has data they collect. Vermont disabilities folks have data that they collect. And part of the idea here too is to not walk over each other in trying to find whatever data exists or what we need to what we need to collect. It's to find out what other organizations are working within the city that need data and that want more or want a particular kind. And so we're not off in different directions. I found out last night, for example, that the housing group is very anxious to get on their needs assessment so that they can make plans. And we both agreed that it might be that they get to the finish line in terms of doing this type of survey, and I would ask them to ask questions for us. So it's also an opportunity to create the kind of collaboration I think that the city needs to bring the groups together. And it's best to do it with an actual project instead of just a meeting to say, hey, what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? I think it's way more effective in terms of really moving forward with whatever plan to actually make a coalition around some activity or some kind of project that needs doing.
You have any other questions?
No, I'm just, no, I don't have any other questions, just an FYI, nobody really collects data on how many people with disabilities there are.
That's the kind of thing I think that we really need to look at. It's not just that, it's also where do they live? Do they all live downtown? What kind of needs are in? So if a project was to something about, let's say, Main Street, And we know that 90% of the people with disabilities live on Main Street. Certainly, we would want to include in that project anything that makes their life better. It could be making sure that there are curb cuts, or it could be making sure that there are sounds with every light. Not that there isn't already, I'm just saying that those are the type of things that, you know, that we would want to know.
Yeah.
Does that
Thank
make
you.
sense to you?
In a sense, it does. I'm, yeah, I'll talk to you after about stuff.
That's fine, yeah. And you know, this is just the beginning, and you know, we could be wrong. Maybe all this data that we need is there, but we'll never, I mean, we really need someone with the academic skills to do this research. I'm pretty good at research, but it's historical. It's not this type of thing. And we have great people on our committee that could also do it, but you know, they have jobs and this is volunteer for them. And we really need a professional study in order to actually use it in grants.
Councillor Hemrick?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Joe. And I was just curious, in terms of putting together a project, what would be the scope of the analysis? I get like a housing and needs assessment or a pedestrian quality index where you're inventorying the condition of sidewalks.
Mhm.
What would the specific areas of focus be?
Well, that's the point. The specifics would be, let's say, compiled by the various organizations that would be involved in it. For example, that's what the housing group might need, but that's not necessarily what we need. One of the things that we need is to discover what kind of underserved folks are living in which neighborhoods. We were starting out trying to figure out a map of the city so that when projects come up in a particular neighborhood, we can figure out how it is going to affect equity.
Yeah, I mean, one comment that I'll bring up is something, Joellen, you brought up last night as we were having a conversation across the committees, was we've invited 3 different committees to review the streets plan. But it came up, well, why isn't the tree stewardship committee involved? Because there are areas where the trees are right on the main road. There could be a need for either a tree removal because it's blocking a light. And that's something that they might have thought of, which they did, that we might not. And additionally, a needs assessment from the Diversity and Equity Committee, they might want to take a look at this too, just for the exact reason that Joellen just mentioned. So,
Well, Joellen, if I think we have Marshall from the Disability Equity Committee meeting with us.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Our meeting is Wednesday night. I think Marshall bought, I got her name wrong.
No, Marichelle, you have the name right, correct.
She's meeting, it's the ADA committee, the TAC, and
Path Routes and Trails.
Path Routes and Trails are meeting Wednesday night.
She has been on our committee, but due to some new position that she has taken in her job, she's not been able to make the commitment, although she has been working with us and keeps track of what we're doing. So, you know, that's another committee that I'm approaching to see who wants to, participate in at least the first meetings. It's only the beginning. Once we get some more information, I would ask Michael to come to council and explain, of course, in more detail. And then we obviously would have to get to the point of what kinds of matching funds or what kinds of responsibilities we would have as a city or as a committee, whatever it is. It's a longer process. And by the way, this type of investigation takes about a year to complete.
So again, the ask for tonight, I believe, is you want a member of council to be a part of that meeting.
Yep.
If nobody else is objecting, I think Councilor Chambel said that she would volunteer to be that person.
Great. I have your email, no problem, and I'll keep in touch.
You do.
Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joanna.
Bye.
Bye. So council, moving on back to 9C, this is the discussion and or approval of voter approved funding language. And the clerk was able to provide that for us in our packet.
Right, so I sent this information to you, and in a nutshell, the current policy, funding request policy, says that the city council will meet to review the prior year's organizational report and funding requests and determine outside organizational funding amounts within the manager's recommended budget, not to exceed the prior year's budget, based on the following priorities, and it lists the priorities. So as per the, I'm cutting to the chase because it's almost 10. As per the policy, the council needs to set a time when it will review the prior year's organizational reports and funding requests and determine the funding amounts within the manager's recommended budget, which is $149,601. That's the amount that's been that was approved for the current year. Besides that, one of the things that the policy says is that items will be bundled into one. This is number 5 on page 2. Funding endorsed by city council shall be bundled and placed on the ballot for voter consideration as a single article. I've put draft language on here for council consideration as to what that bundling would look like. I also have given you, for informational purposes, some information about a court case in Rutland County in 2009, where the court ruled against Middletown Springs and the way they were doing similar language on their ballot. It only holds true in Rutland County, but VLCT is recommending a different approach to the way items are on the ballot. That's something you can take into consideration or not, but I put it there for your information. So under recommended action and motions, I've got, develop a schedule and procedure for review of the applications, approve the funding amounts, and approve the warning. And the language format. There's a very tight timeline for all of this. The deadline for submissions is January 3rd. And the council needs to act within a very short period of time, because the organizations, if you were to choose not to fund some of the organizations or include them, they then have to, there's a process where they would have to submit a letter in writing to me to be placed on the ballot individually. And we're up against the warning deadline for town meeting. So there is a fairly tight window in which to have all of this occur. So
Yeah, it sounds like
that's
between
why I bring it forward.
the 4th and the 18th of January, something like that. Because we'd have to warn the town meeting day warning. I can't believe if it's the I can't remember, 28th.
Yeah.
Which our meeting would be the 25th.
Yes.
So technically it'd be between the 4th and the 25th to have that all figured out. And since it is a council action, we could either do it as a special meeting before one of our council meetings, or we could have it as an item. I think probably a special beforehand would make more sense, just to get it taken care of.
And I can certainly, well in advance of that, I can share or I can dump it into the shared drive. I can, make the packets of materials and applications available. We've received 10 out of 22 at this point in time. So just to give you an idea of what we've got up to now.
So, and I don't think that if the deadline is the 3rd, I don't think the 4th is realistic. We just noted that on the 11th is when we want to have the discussion for the ARPA funds. So the 18th would most likely be a good time frame for that.
That gives a week afterwards. that really makes it tight, but yeah.
But at least we would let people know now that that's our timeline. So by the 18th, we would have the decisions at that time. And I do agree. It's a first time we're running through this, so we'll see how it proceeds. So if no one's objecting to that, I'm thinking that would be a 6 p.m. special on the 18th. And that way there we can make sure that that's taken care of before our regular meeting. Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, hey.
Oh, Councilor Booth?
Carol, do you think that's too tight?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I
so-
thought I made that clear, but
Yeah, no, I thought you did too, which is the reason why I wanted to.
I don't know what the other options are. I've brought this up to council a few other times over the past couple months, and we're coming down to the deadline, so.
Well, the other suggestion would be if we're having the regular meeting all for ARPA on the 11th, we could have it as the special meeting on the 11th. And that way there gives a little more time. Fine with me.
And we can't do it on the 4th because the deadline for applicants to submit their forms is the 3rd?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I can have everything I've got as I get it put in the share drive, but you know, if I get 12 applications on the 3rd,
Yeah.
that's how much time you're gonna have to review them, so.
Does the policy set the 3rd as a deadline?
Yes.
Okay.
So then just to reiterate, it's not going to be the 18th, it'll be the 11th. That way there we give a little time after the applications are due and a little more time after before the deadline would need to be met by any of those organizations for placing
For
them in the
appeal,
ballot.
yeah.
Okay. Well, we've settled that whole meeting. The 11th is complete. Okay, council. So moving on to item 9E, this is the discussion on council preferences for strategic planning consultant selection. Steve, I'll turn that over to you, and you had some information in our packet.
Yeah, I had just a brief description in the packet cover memo. This doesn't need to be a long discussion. I really would, it would be helpful to me and appreciate guidance from the council as to how it would like to go through the review and selection process of the strategic planning proposals. To my surprise, we received 11. To my further surprise, 3 are from Vermont, and then the balance are from throughout the country, throughout as far as Utah and Colorado. I think I've had them compiled. I have not had a chance to look at them yet. I believe from what Jody told me, they run maybe in the 10 to 20 pages per proposal. So my question to the council is, does the council want to receive these and review them collectively, or would you like the staff, like me to develop a staff team to review and screen them and perhaps come back with what we think are the top 3 for the council? Say again?
Giving us 3 choices rather than 11, I think would be a good use of our time.
Well, as do I, but I didn't want to start down the road in one direction and then have council feel they want to do something different. So it's a relatively simple decision, I think.
I agree with the mayor.
Okay. Do you need
Okay.
anything on that?
So I'll set up a staff review team and we'll come back to you with what we think are the top 3.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
And it is 10, but we do have item 9G, which was added just to talk about the upcoming meetings. So council, just for, can you give me back ability to share? I have lost it for some reason, but
I don't know.
what I've done is we have all of our draft agendas, which everyone has access to out on the share drive. And I just wanted to make sure that we have that as part of the discussion. So Councilor Hemrick, if you had anything specific you wanted to bring up, I'll just try to show this as we go through that.
So we're not meeting on the 28th, or we are meeting on the 28th?
At this point, we would not be meeting on the 28th.
Okay, but we are meeting the 18th, the 21st, not meeting the 28th, meeting the 4th. And then we need to, and then the 11th, but there are no other Saturday meetings yet in January?
Currently, we have not set anything in January for a Saturday meeting.
Okay.
So just to look at the agendas, because Steve is going to have to manage this next one because it's pretty long. The 4th, we've deferred a number of ordinance items because we just haven't been able to get to them because of the lengthy agendas. And then the 11th will need to change because those items will have to be deferred because we noted that is going to be the ARPA process. So that's been added right here. And then there'll be a special meeting on that day for discussing the
Funding request.
So, and if I keep taking this further, there's a little time on the 18th, but we're hopefully having Stephanie come back for that presentation on TIF. And then on the 25th is when we have our approval of the warning for annual town meeting day. And then I believe we have the first and second of any discussions on charter changes around that time too.
The first public hearing is that will be that day. Yeah.
So, and then February will be playing cleanup before we get into town meeting day on March. Okay. So with that said, as you can see, these are already pretty full. And a lot of these items will most likely be deferred to subsequent meetings, and that will be up to the manager to decide. But Steve, just note that on the 11th, you might as well defer all the items that are on that one just because we've already booked it for other purposes.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the 18th agenda?
Yep, this is
Okay,
January
thank you.
18th.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. Okay, do you have any other discussion you wanted on that? Okay. Okay, well, seeing none,
I'm
we're
sure
at
I'll have plenty.
roundtable. And then after roundtable, there was a request that we go into executive session for personnel. So since Sam, are you still there?
Yep.
I am here.
Okay.
I don't have anything for roundtable.
Okay.
I pass.
Michael?
Just want to say thank you to all those that came on Saturday to wrap presents. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, I do appreciate it. I'll just try to go and name them off. Rich, Maury, Jeffrey, Topper Giles, Lucas Herring, Renita Marshall, Anthony and Peter. I don't know what their last names are, but they're friends of Katie Fleury. And yes, no, not Peter Anthony. We had that conversation. And Jason Fleury was there. And I just really appreciate everyone that showed up, and really awesome to wrap the presents.
Thank you. Erica?
Pass.
Mel?
Pass.
Eddie?
Honoring and remembering the 9th anniversary of the Sandy Hook Massacre in Connecticut. As well as, on a much lighter note, the library looks absolutely beautiful, all decked out for the holidays, with all of the trees. So I would highly encourage everyone to go check out the library. It looks lovely.
Thank you. Jake?
I want to thank all the volunteers. I wasn't able to attend the volunteer appreciation event last night. I was triple booked and had to pick the one that pays my bills. But I hope it was a good event, and certainly they help make the city run. Also, just my thoughts are going out to everybody who's in an ICU fighting for their lives right now all over the country, and all the health professionals working so hard to keep everybody safe and alive. And I also want to say I have chickens next door, and I love them, and my neighbor's great, and I think they're a nice thing for the city. Hopefully we struck a really good balance in the approach to the ordinance tonight, and can get that across the finish line. So thanks.
Thank you. So just to speak
Mayor?
to the event last night a little bit, it went a lot longer than I thought it was going to. We had committees give a little bit of an update on the items that they were working on if they were there. We were able to give out certificates for those that had 5-year increments from starting at 20 years of service of being a volunteer, up to 35 plus years. So Richard Deep was the one person that was in attendance that could accept one of those certificates for 35 plus years. And it was just great to see that those that are the work that's still going on. You know, we did the we had all the different groups come in and present to council to talk about what their priorities are. But of course, we haven't heard from them in a while. And now we're going to see what those committee reports are going to be, because they're going to be in the annual report. So it's kind of interesting to see how that all played out. One thing that came out of it, though, was it was kind of a consensus between all the groups that we have either some sort of literature drop or a newsletter from the city that actually gets information out, because not everyone's on social media these days and they don't read the paper. So unless it's something that is received directly by them, it's something that they may never know about. And apparently that's one thing that Barre Town does, is a quarterly newsletter, rather than a literature drop, which would be people just walking around door to door to put that out there. So just to put that in the back of your minds for when we have our budget conversation on Saturday. And then Sam, I am thankful that last meeting you talked about the lights. I went up for some Chinese food, and when I put in my order, they said, you know, it's going to be 15 minutes. So I took a little cruise around and took some pictures, and the lights are just amazing this year. They're everywhere. It seems like every time I go back out, there's another house that decided to add some more lights, and it's just looking great. So just wanted to add that. So with that, Michael, you had one other item?
Yeah, I apologize. I did not thank you for showing up as well. I completely left you out of it, and I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no,
So
I
thank
think,
you.
but either way, it's fine. So with that, council, we are looking to go in executive session for personnel. So
Motion
this
for
would be-
findings?
Second, inviting the city manager.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion for findings, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
opposed, nay. And then the motion to go into executive session and inviting the manager along. Is there a
So
motion?
moved. So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, nay. Okay, we'll be in executive session as soon as
I leave the room and
we set up the
you
room.
set up.
Okay. Thank you.
Lucas, do you expect any action?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Warm in here again.
Yeah, I noticed you taking off.
I know,
layers.
it's-
Yeah.
And
I hope it's not.
Make a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're out.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Just noting there's no action. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We
Good
are
night,
adjourned.
Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Good night.
Gonna check the weather here.